Welcome to today with a new video friend, name of new series. What if Naruto was reborn as Itachi's younger sister? This unique story, written by Lily 1478, imagines the bonds, the conflicts, and the challenges in this new life within the Uchiha clan. Stay tuned as we explore how Naruto's unique spirit and determination could change everything in this fascinating twist on the Naruto universe. I humble request you to please support me to reach 1000 subscribers as soon as possible. Friend, I need your help. Please support me. Like the video and comment for more amazing content videos like this. Let's start this video. Diana blinked a few times as her instincts insisted that she continue to drink from the surprise bottle of formula. As the bottle emptied, her thoughts about her rebirth continued. An Uchiha? Nah. I read too many reincarnation novels. It would be just as likely that I have reincarnated into a Japanese family more obsessed with Naruto than I am. Either way, I'm still a baby. Her eyes glistened at the thought. If I really reincarnated into Japan, I can find my family in America when I am older. It can't be too hard. My parents' house has been in the family for generations. I just need to study hard and become an exchange student. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. This made Diana suck on the bottle with a newfound vigor that made Mrs. Uchiha chuckle above her. Drink up, my little one. Drink up and become strong and healthy. Diana wished that she watched more subbed anime instead of dubbed as she listened to the woman's incoherent chatter. This is beyond humiliating. Diana thought as a figure, who she considered to be a nurse, changed her diaper for the 5th time that day. She squinted at the figure before letting out a hoarse sigh, still feeling the strain from her last instinctual screech fest. The only good thing about today is that I am no longer in that dome thing and have that sticky breathing tube out of my nose. If only it was the same with that sharp 4. Her thoughts were interrupted by the opening of her door, knowing that it was the so-called Uchiha. She was the only one who visited her, after all. Diana expected to have her just talk to the nurse, maybe rub her head, and feed her before leaving like always. What she didn't expect was for her to swiftly wrap her slender hands under her and lift her into her arms. No! Put me down! Diana shouted in her mind as she flailed in the blurry figure's arm, letting out a whine. Mrs. Uchiha only let out a chuckle as she snuggled Diana close to her, putting her head over her heart. Its effect was almost immediate. The feeling of love and safety flowed through Diana like a warm stream. As she listened to her the woman's heartbeat, she felt a serene nostalgia. She couldn't help but smile. You are going to meet your father and brother soon, Mrs. Uchiha told Diana as she rocked her ever so slowly. She wearily yawned in reply, feeling her eyes become more and more droopy. It took her no time to fall asleep. A few hours later, Diana awoke to the feeling of someone poking her cheek. Her dazed eyes opened to see the shape of a little boy looking down at her. She made an exaggerated frown at him before flailing her sloppy limbs, making mopey sounds as she went. Come here you. You're worse than my brother. Sterling. She stopped flailing and felt tears coming to her eyes at the images that popped into her head. Diana's antics made her new brother lightly chuckle and her mother make shushing noises while rocking her gently. A deep chuckle was heard somewhere off to the side before her body was met with a pair of large calloused hands. She looked up at the owner of the hands to see a blurry man lifting her up in the air, the faint smell of ash filling her nose. His very presence made her freeze and stare at him with watery eyes. His stern demeanor reminded her of her father, a wicked man indeed. She hoped that he would be better. Have you given her a name? The man, who she assumed to be Mrs. Uchiha's husband, asked as he pulled Diana close to his chest. Humiya, the obscure woman replied happily. Humiya Uchiha. Humiya, the giant man repeated wistfully. The perfect name for a healthy baby girl. Diana snuggled into the warmth of who she assumed to be Mr. Uchiha's chest at the comforting tone of the man's voice and watched as he went towards the window. She listened to the bustling outside, wishing that she could see her old family with a pang in her chest. But that wasn't the only pain there. Another wave came that was so great that she let out a desperate gasp, her eyes wide and teary. What's happening? It hurts. I can't breathe. Mr. Uchiha was frantic as he watched his daughter go from calmly snuggling into him to a weeping mess. He tried to rock her to calm her down, but Diana continued to struggle, her face turning tomato red. Fugaku. What happened? Mrs. Uchiha cried, surprised by the outburst. I wish I knew, Mikoto, Fugaku voiced before handing Diana back to Mikoto, who began checking her newborn to see what was wrong. I am going to get the doctor. Itachi, stay with your mother and sister. Itachi nodded numbly as he watched his father leave the room before looking at his crying sister and worried mother. The moment Fugaku came back into the room with the doctor, she barfed all over herself and Mikoto. The doctor immediately went over to Diana, who had the blanket soiled with vomit taken off of her. The medical professional's hand began to glow green before gliding his hand onto her abdomen to examine her vitals. The moment the doctor's hand touched Diana, she gave one final painful screech before falling deep into unconsciousness, wishing that she could just go back to being Diana Bagley. Diana felt completely drained the next time she woke up or when she thought she woke up. She found herself not as a premature baby in a hospital but herself in a bright endless space with lights like stars soaring through the night. The woman looked down at her already standing self, wearing what she wore before she died. I'm me? I'm me. Diana began to touch her face and body with glee. Who are you, anomaly? A feminine voice echoed, calm but stern. Diana froze mid-motion and quickly looked up with surprise. Standing across from her was a woman with hair darker than the stagnant darkness and skin white as death, seemingly staring daggers at her despite her eyes being closed. Diana immediately looked away when she noticed the mysterious woman's lack of shame. The only thing covering her was her flowing hair draped over her chest which flowed down like a smoky fog. What do you mean, anomaly? Who are you? Diana spluttered, trembling at the nude woman's intimidating presence. Don't play dumb, anomaly, the woman warned, stepping closer with her pale finger pointing accusingly at her. You are not from me. You are not one of my children. I cannot let something not from me be born into the Uchiha clan. Diana didn't reply, her throat too tight for her to speak. Uchiha clan? The one in Naruto? I couldn't have reincarnated there. This has to be a dream. Before she could sort out her thoughts, the woman's hot hand gripped her chin and pulled her to face her, her fiery breath making her skin burn. Please don't hurt me, Diana begged in shock, her plans to reunite with her family shattering the more she stared at the intimidating woman's face. The woman let go of Diana's chin, seemingly caught off guard from her reaction. Oh, looks like I have misjudged. The woman grieved, watching Diana as her trembling legs gave out from under her. Instead of one of those demons, I have found a lost soul at the brink of death. The woman's wretched face morphed into a look of pity, her voice sickly sweet. So much pain I feel in you. No wonder you are as skewed as a demon. The blessing of oblivion wasn't given to you. Poor little thing. Diana looked up to her at that, tears starting to fall from her eyes. She feared the small smile that creased across the woman's youthful face. She feared it more than anything. But do not fret, small anomaly. For I, Naka, will set things right by giving you the blessing of oblivion. You will soon join the many souls in their endless cycle of life and death. Now be cleansed of your sorrows, my anomaly. Naka gently placing her hand down on the sparkling floor. Diana tried her best to scoot away but was unable to move. Black fire sprung forth from Naka's hand and wrapped itself around Diana's ankles. She gasped, frightened by the cold flame dragging her toward the fiery portal. But I don't want to start anew. I want to go back home to my world. I know I don't belong here. You're an all-powerful being. You can take me back, right? Please send me back to my family instead of this. Diana cried while pushing herself back in vain. Naka tilted her head. That is impossible. Wherever you came from is out of my jurisdiction. Souls can only move forward. Forget your old cycle and welcome your new one, Naka simply stated. Diana flailed desperately and begged harder as her feet began to get absorbed by the portal. No, please. Don't do this. Don't make me forget. She pleaded before wrapping her arms around Naka for dear life. Naka stared at Diana's frantic shrieks with a look of confusion. Why are you resisting oblivion? Doesn't everyone want to end their suffering and cure your battered soul? It would be like it never existed and you will be at peace in your next life. But it did exist. Diana wailed. My family exists. They loved me as much as I loved them. I know my family is suffering because I am gone and I am suffering because I was forced to leave them. This is the only connection that I have to them. Her arms trembled from the strain of flinging against oblivion. Please, it's all I have left. Diana's grip slipped and she felt become torso deep in oblivion. She stared into the goddess's one eye in horror. So just send me back to my baby form instead of this. I'll learn how to be an Uchiha, but I will always be Diana Bagley, she said with as much strength as she could muster. Naka frowned and thought about it for a second before swiftly pulling Diana out of the portal she made. Diana felt as if oblivion drained the strength from her as she stared at her impending doom, completely helpless. What an interesting little soul. I will respect your choice, Naka announced, it being almost a whisper. But I want you to help me in return. That will be your price. My price? Yes, your price. Naka beckoned, eyes opened wide. Diana held back a scream as she was forced to stare into Naka's empty sockets, tears of blood flowing down onto the starry ground. I lost my eyes in the land of the living. Find them or your memories will consume you and your soul's cycle will end. Once a soul's cycle stops, it can never continue. You would be lost forever and will become one with the clay. Diana gulped before nodding, knowing that this was the only way to keep her family close. And my life after this one? Naka lifted her arms up and shook her head. Who knows? With a soul like yours, anything is possible. But know this. The woman caressed Diana's cheeks and forced her to face her. That a goddess always keeps her promises, and I promise you that whatever happens to you onward, you will remember it as long as you find my eyes. Naka took a deep breath and blew smoke into Diana's face, making her vision hazy. Wait! Diana coughed. What do I do with your eyes once I find them? Naka grimaced. Once you find them, bring them to my home and burn them as an offering to me in my altar. Don't let this be a lifelong journey, Naka echoed before Diana lost consciousness. And with that, Humiya's life truly began. The moment Humiya opened her dull eyes, her body felt weighed down and limp. They're gone, really gone, and I'm in Naruto. All of her strength seemingly disintegrated as the memories of her past life echoed in her mind with full clarity. Every family meal, every all-nighter, every episode, all were as clear as day. She felt weightlessly heavy due to the pressure of her lifetime deal, and there was nothing she could do about it. Her reality was sealed. It came to the point that not much mattered outside of her, not even the sharp needle inside her arm or tube stuck up her nose made much of a difference. The initial fear of not being in control of her extremities long dissipated. She stared at the foggy figure of Mikoto who hovered over her, rubbing her forehead as usual. Her guardian turned her head when the door to Humiya's hospital room opened to reveal a white figure of a doctor, scribbling something down on a clipboard. We have done all we can to keep her stable since her relapse, Mrs. Uchiha. After giving her a full checkup on her vitals, we found that she is extremely hypersensitive to chakra and has heart defects, the doctor told Mikoto as he continued to write notes. He flipped his notebook closed and looked up at Mikoto. A baby with hypersensitivity is very rare, especially one being born prematurely with heart defects. But that isn't even the worst of it. Mikoto simply nodded in reply, blinking unshed tears as she turned back to watch Humiya's chest move up and down with each breath. Mrs. Uchiha, her brain is overdeveloped, the doctor said grimly. Mikoto looked the doctor in the eyes. Overdeveloped? Should it not be good news? Mikoto's voice heightening with each breath. The doctor gulped, his stance showing how uncomfortable he was. I am afraid not. An overdeveloped brain doesn't mean Humiya has any type of cognitive advantages. Premature babies with overdeveloped brains are more susceptible to developmental delays and learning disabilities. Due to her heart defects, she is even more likely to have these setbacks. Are you telling me that my child is inept? Mikoto snared, her Sharingan blazing red. How dare you accuse my child of having disabilities? Humiya's eyes watered at the sudden shouts of Mikoto, making her let out a whimper. Dr. Sato flinched but held his ground. Shoo. I didn't mean to startle you. Mikoto hushed, her trembling hand stroking her forehead. Your child's defects have no cure and will affect her for the rest of her life. We can only lessen the pain she will be in. Get out, Mikoto ordered the doctor, not wanting to listen to any more. I said leave. The doctor calmly bowed before doing just that. Humiya stared up at Mikoto, watching as the woman blinked away a few tears and placed a finger on Humiya's open palm. Humiya gaped as her guardian's tears dropped onto her cheeks. With a heavy heart, Humiya gave a comforting coo as she wrapped her hands around Mikoto's finger. There. It's okay, Humiya. Mama is here. Mama loves you. Mama will never leave you, Mikoto whispered, rubbing her thumb over her fingers. So rough. Humiya leaned into her guardian's hand, feeling a pang in her heart. Mama, can I really call her that? You are not inept. You can't be, Mikoto sobbed. You would die if you are. Humiya watched in shock as her guardian fell to her knees, covering her mouth to muffle her weeping. Mikoto then shakily reached down into her pocket and took out a necklace of obsidian glass beads with a blood-red charm shaped like a lotus on its black tassel. She brought the beads close to her lips, almost as if to kiss it. Hail great Naka, bringer of life. Please hear my cries, merciful mother. Naka, nurturer of Uchiha's fire, I beseech thee. Bring light to Humiya's life. Please save my child's mind. Mikoto wept, saying the phrase over and over again for every bead on her charm, her quivering voice becoming slow and precise with each reading, going deep into a trance. Yumiya's heart ached every time that name was worshipped, wishing that she understood what was being said. Suddenly, the temperature in the room began to increase. All is well. Mother is always there when her children call to give comfort, a familiar voice beckoned from a distance. Yumiya's heart stopped when she heard that familiar voice and understood it. She whimpered as she watched Naka appear out of a stream of light coming from the window and wrap her pale arms around an unbeknownst Mikoto, giving her a comforting back hug, looking more like a mist hazing through her than around her. Dear child, forgive me, for I am unable to fix anything that ails you in the realm of Yang. The goddess looked up at Yumiya with her droopy closed eyes and frowned. No wonder you were at the brink. Didn't your world have any natural energy? Chakra? Yumiya bit her lip with her gums. Naka got up and put a warm hand on Yumiya's stomach, making Yumiya wince. Oh dear, she muttered as she drew her hand away. Your foreign soul is not adjusting to your new body well. What makes it worse is your sorrowful heart. Thankfully, your mind is intact and will not be in need of saving. A sorrowful heart? Yumiya asked, not liking the expression on Naka's face. Yes. Emotional distress can cause harm to the body, disrupt chakra. You must have mourned greatly for your loved ones in the womb as your heart was being developed. It struggles as much as you turmoil, Naka explained with a tut-tut. There isn't much that I can do about your heart. You already took a lot out of me when I attempted to give you salvation. Yumiya couldn't hide her frown. At this point, she wondered if her life would ever have a semblance of good in it. It is not like I can control my emotions. My death was a tragedy. I didn't want to die. I didn't even know that I was in a womb until I was born. She whined. Her cries made Mikoto pray harder. Most deaths are tragedies, my child. No mortal really knows when they are going to die, Naka consoled while caressing Yumiya's cheek. I can't heal your physical body, but I can heal your spiritual connection, Naka said before giving Yumiya's left ankle a soft peck. I give you my blessing, child. Welcome to the family. The weight that Yumiya didn't even know was on her chest lifted, her limbs not as sluggish. She couldn't help but coo with relief. Little did she know that the spot where Naka kissed formed a deep brown lotus-shaped birthmark. Mikoto was on her last bead. My work here is done, Naka signed, tired. Remember our deal. You may not see nor hear me, but I will be with you. Remember our deal, the goddess said before giving Yumiya a poke on the forehead. And with that, Naka dispersed into a stream of light, leaving a warm comforting breeze. Yumiya watched her leave, feeling better than she had ever been. She stared at the spot where Naka was before, contemplating her relationship with the goddess. Ugh! I really hope it won't be too difficult. Mikoto ended her prayer and opened her eyes. She smiled wearily at Yumiya. I always feel warm after I pray. Maybe she would finally answer. Mikoto kissed Yumiya on her forehead and looked down at her over caught sight of the birthmark, making her gasp with relief. The Great Mother answered, Yumiya. You will live, Mikoto beamed, smile brighter than the red in her eyes. Days began to blur as Yumiya lay trapped in her dull white hospital room, constantly dealing with the prodding doctors and nurses. She slept most of the time, waking up during odd times of the day. The only thing that Yumiya looked forward to was when Mikoto came to visit her. She basked in Mikoto's warmth and felt complete security in her arms. But today felt different. Yumiya flinched as the doctor took the 4 out of her arm. Isn't this great, Dr. Sato? Little Yumiya is being discharged already. Dr. Sato hummed drearily as he wrote some notes on his clipboard. Yes, she has been stable for a week. Her mother and brother will be here in less than an hour. Make sure she is presentable, Akatsuki, he said to the nurse before promptly leaving. Yes sir. Akatsuki cheered, hot pink eyes sparkling as she followed the doctor out. That was quicker than usual. Thank goodness. Yumiya sighed with relief. Sadly, her moment of solace was short-lived. A few moments later, the nurse came back with a basket of bathing supplies and clean clothes. Yumiya cringed at the fire in the nurse's eyes. I am going to make you look fabulous. Akatsuki cackled as she picked Yumiya up from her crib and to the sink, handling her more like a doll than a baby. She turned on the sink and filled it with warm water and soap before dunking Yumiya into the warm soapy water. Ugh! Shouldn't nurses handle babies gentler? Yumiya sneezed from the strong flowery smell coming from the soap, making Akatsuki chuckle as she scrubbed. She blew strands of her dirty blonde hair out her face as she cleaned her. After the nurse cleaned Yumiya, she clothed her in a pink dress and skillfully wrapped her in a thick pink blanket like a gift. Lastly, she tied a bright red bow on the top of her head, completing her present-like image. There, perfection. Your mom is going to love this. Akatsuki gushed before placing the bound Yumiya into a bright white sling. This is horrible. It's as if I am tied up with rope. Yumiya struggled to get her hands out of the tightly bound blanket as the nurse walked out of the hospital room and down the long hallway. The moment she finally got her hands free, they arrived at their destination. Akatsuki gave the door a jubilant knock. Come in. The doctor called from the other side. Yumiya looked curiously around the office as the nurse entered with her, happy that her vision had become clearer. The office was simple and plain. It had a desk, a few chairs, and a small bookshelf. The only thing that gave the room any color was the small wilted plant on the desk, pitifully curled inward with its brown spots. Dr. Sato sat at his desk with a placid smile on his face while Mikoto and Itachi occupied the two chairs across from him. Yumiya and Itachi's eyes, making her heart drop. The one who is going to kill me in a few years. She continued to stare at him, noting how his eyes reminded her of a worried kitten, wide and teary. Yumiya sighed. He is what? 3? I have time. Maybe if I be his sweet little sister, he might spare me. Mikoto elegantly got up from where she was sitting the moment she locked eyes with Yumiya and walked over to the nurse. Akatsuki excitedly handed Yumiya to Mikoto, who accepted the sling with a satisfied smile. Itachi silently watched his mom interact with his new sister, curious. It's time to go, Yumiya. Mikoto hummed before beckoning Itachi to hold her hand. Yumiya watched as little Itachi numbly placed his hand onto Mikoto's open palm. Remember to contact me if any problems occur, and her prescription will soon be available soon, Dr. Sato said before giving them a bow. Mikoto and Itachi hastily mirrored his bow before walking out the door. The streets of Konoha bustled as the trio went down them, birds chirping in the afternoon sun and citizens chatting amongst themselves. The uniquely shaped buildings towered over them with their colorful roofs. Yumiya watched the different types of people walk past them. Some of them looked normal with their black or blonde hair, while others contrasted with hair colors that looked like they came from a rainbow. Does hair dye exist in this world? Yumiya carelessly wondered as she was carried down the dusty dirt roads. She watched in amazement as she saw ninjas in different uniforms jump through the village from rooftop to rooftop. Itachi stared up at his mother and Yumiya as they walked in silence, his dark eyes reflecting his mind going a mile a minute. Mom? Yumiya will get better, right? Itachi asked hesitantly. Mikoto stopped abruptly at her son's innocent question, unconsciously clutching her new bundle of life in her son's hand, time seemingly coming to a standstill. Itachi, your sister was born early and has many problems because of it. Yumiya will have to live with them for the rest of her life, she stated before turning to her son and kneeling down to his eye level. She put her hand on his shoulder and gave Itachi a strained smile. That is why we will all look after little Yumiya and give her our support. It is going to take a little longer for her to understand things, and many will look down on her because of it, Mikoto said as she caressed Yumiya's cheek. Yumiya looked at Mikoto and Itachi when she felt her guardian's warm hand. Good big brothers take care of their siblings and are patient with them. You are a good big brother, right? Mikoto asked kindly. Itachi looked at Yumiya as she gave a long yawn. Yes, he replied softly with a nod. Great! Mikoto cooed before rubbing Itachi's head affectionately. She then got up and continued towards the Uchiha district, holding Itachi's hand as she went. Yumiya dozed off while they walked, not minding the autumn air biting at her cheeks. The Uchiha district was like a village within a village, crowds of clan members walking about. It was hard to tell them apart from afar with the little variation in their appearances. Many of them were civilians going about their day and making their products to sell to each other and to buy things from. The clan symbol littered the signs and buildings. The Uchiha love their symbol as much as Americans love their flags. Yumiya mused after she woke up from her dozing. She looked around the district in awe at how different it looked from the rest of the village. The many buildings were 1 or 2 stories with tile roofs that curved upward. Mikoto and Itachi walked past the shops, giving the occasional wave to clansmen who gave passing greetings. They stopped near a large traditional-style house at the edge of the district. Yumiya squinted her eyes when she saw a figure already standing in front of their house, twirling a red floral parasol. Grandmother? Mikoto asked as she walked closer, surprised at the unexpected visit. The woman turned around and smiled proudly at the trio, her eyes like a fox. She didn't look anything like a grandmother in her red kimono that was covered in elegant lotus designs and pastel pink obi that has the clan symbol on the back of it. The only thing signaling that she was an older woman was her graying hair. The white makeup she wore effortlessly covered the little wrinkles that she had and contrasted with her deep red lips and red lotus painted on her forehead. Grandmother? She looks like Mikoto's older sister. Yumiya smiled a toothless smile at the thought. This means that I have good genes. Hyo-basen, Itachi light greeted with a bow. Hyo-basen chuckled at Itachi's formal greeting behind her sleeve. She then went and quickly pinched his cheek, nails painted red and immaculate. Little Itachi, you are the most respectful toddler I have ever met, Hyo-basen cooed before letting go and looking up at Mikoto. You taught your child well, dearie. Itachi puffed out his cheek in a pout as he rubbed the spot where the older woman pinched it and hid behind Mikoto's plain black skirt. Itachi's pouting face and antics were so expressive that Yumiya couldn't help but start laughing. It felt like the first time in a lifetime. Mikoto beamed down at Yumiya as she continued to laugh and motioned everyone inside. What kind of tea would you like, grandmother? Mikoto asked as she took her sandals off and put them away with Itachi hastily copying her before scurrying upstairs. Green tea is fine, Hyo-basen replied as she gracefully slipped off her sandals and closed her parasol. She sighed as she watched Itachi go. Little Itachi is always like this when he gets the chance. Running away from his poor old great-grandmother. I still can't believe that I have lived to see the day. 2 great shinobi wars and I am still here. That is because you are a priestess, Mikoto replied simply. Head priestess and a clan elder now too. Not that it really means anything other than celebrating us being old and senile, which I am far from, mind you. Very far from, Hyo-basen retorted as she situated herself down at the table in the dining room in Seiza position, and war touches everyone. Destruction in the hopes of prosperity. Peace is only the absence of war. I wouldn't be surprised if we are secretly preparing for another one. Especially with those who are in power now. Power-hungry swine, the lot of them, grandmother. I am right. Now, hand me our new addition, so I can get a good look at her. I'm not getting any younger. Hyo-basen chirped, hands open and ready. Mikoto handed Yumiya to her great-grandmother with an exasperated sigh before beginning to prepare the tea. Hyo-basen immediately unraveled her from her blanket to reveal the lotus-shaped birthmark on her left ankle. Hey! Let go! Why are her hands so calloused? Yumiya wondered as Hyo-basen rubbed the mark. Her whole being screams pampered noblewoman. Yumiya kicked her leg from her great-grandmother's grasp with a frown when the constant rubbing became too much. I can assure you that Yumiya's birthmark is real, Mikoto stated as she dug into her cabinet. I had to make sure. Mikoto's grandmother huffed. You haven't been the most honest child in the past. Remember when you poisoned your teammates with one of my husband's concoctions, dearie? Mikoto sharply turned toward her grandmother, eyebrow twitching. Grandmother, I was only 12. I mistook grandfather's medicine with his lotus sake. It was not my fault that they downed it so quickly and got alcohol poisoning. We have been over this, she argued with a pout and a hand on her hip. Yumiya mirrored her pout as she watched Hyo-basen let out a hearty laugh, revealing the gaps in her mouth from her missing teeth. And you were not able to take the Chunin exams that year and those boys were too sick to care. Thank goodness I count them every day. Little rascals, the lot of you. Hyo-basen sighed, wiping a tear before she noticed Yumiya's expression. In response to Yumiya's pout, Hyo-basen pinched her cheek which made her cry out. That was uncalled for. She whimpered and tried to wrap her tiny fingers around Hyo-basen's grip to pull her away from her throbbing cheek, making the old woman laugh some more. Well, would you look at that? Yumiya has a temper. Even with her frail body, her sharp eyes tell me that she is going to go far in life, she resolved before she took her hand off of Yumiya's cheek. Yumiya put her hand over her now red cheek and reached out for Mikoto with her other hand. Get me out of this mean old hag's arms. I beg you. You should stop patronizing my children, grandmother. There is a reason why most of the children avoid your hands, Mikoto muttered as she put the tea in a bowl of senbei crackers on the table before taking Yumiya back into her arms. Yumiya sighed with relief as Mikoto tucked her back into her pink blanket. Safe at last. Ha! Children's cheeks are so soft that they are meant to be pinched. You will be doing it too when you are my age, Hyo-basen teased, making a pinching motion with her hand. Mikoto rolled her eyes with a small smile. Anyways, how is the shrine? She asked. This made Hyo-basen's smile fade into a frown. Still standing, if that is what you are wondering. Hardly anyone goes there to pray to Naka and give her offerings anymore. If I were her, I would slap some sense into them, but Naka wouldn't like it. The will of fire seems to be more important these days, Hyo Basin replied before taking a sip of her tea and putting her hand on her chin. It is what keeps the village going. It was what kept me going when I was a jonin, Mikoto supplied as she sipped her tea. But it isn't everything, Hyo Basin insisted, leaning forward on the table before snatching a cracker from the bowl and taking a bite out of it. This village is small in the grand scheme of things, barely even 100 years old. I was still training to be a shrine maiden when the village was being built. Love is important and so is family, but the village isn't our family. The clan is. If the village ever saw us like family, they wouldn't be keeping us at such a distance, Hyo Basin ranted before taking another bite. Before she could continue her rigmaroles, Mikoto perked up at the sound of the front door opening, making Hyo Basin look back. Yumiya looked towards the door as well. I'm home, Fugaku called. Hyo Basin drank the rest of her tea and stink-eyed the clock while Mikoto jumped up and scurried to the door. Welcome home, she said brightly when Fugaku came into view. Yumiya looked up at Fugaku and noticed a small smile form on his face. He then frowned and looked around. Where is Itachi? My grandmother is here, Mikoto told him. Ah, he replied. Is she staying for dinner? I was just leaving, Hyo Basin interjected, walking past the pair and towards the door. It is time for me to return to the shrine. I can't keep it in the hands of the maidens for long. It was so nice talking to you, dearie, Hyo Basin said fondly with a bow before putting in her shoes and grabbing her parasol. Mikoto and Fugaku gave a respectful bow back. Remember to visit, she said offhandedly as she closed the door behind her. Good riddance. Face pincher, Yumiya thought as she watched Hyo Basin go with a pout. She turned to her Fugaku and noticed the small smile back on his face and watched as his rough hand scooped her up from Mikoto's arms and up into the air. Yumiya felt exhilaration stir within her as she was lifted up into the air, making her let out a squeal. I am so glad that Yumiya is home, Fugaku stated as he brought the giggling Yumiya to his chest. Mikoto nodded, her face shifting from her usual placid smile to a slight frown. Yes, but she isn't better, she replied, crossing her arms over her torso. Fugaku knit his brows before taking a step closer to his wife. Not better? Then why did they release her? Before Mikoto could answer, Yumiya let out a whimper due to her stomach growling. Ah, she's hungry. I'll tell you more about it after I feed her and put her in her crib, she whispered. Mikoto opened her arms and scooped Yumiya from Fugaku's and laid Yumiya's head on her shoulder while she walked up the stairs. Yumiya couldn't get Fugaku's concerned expression out of her head as she was carried away. The eventful day of coming to her new home ended with a seemingly quiet night. Konoha nightlife bristles outside her open window, people passing by through wisps of small flames, some larger than others. Yumiya closed her eyes and wondered if there would ever be pure darkness. She sensed faint pulses everywhere, warm currents sweeping past from moving flames. The constant stimulus oddly didn't pain her at all. In truth, it made her feel more real, more connected. This feels nice, like I'll never be in that dark void ever again. Yumiya mused as she watched the world wrap her in a glittery blanket of energy. She snuggled herself into her new crib with a sigh, the soft cream cushion sinking against her small frame. It was made of a warm brown wood which color fit perfectly with her cream-colored walls surrounded by deep brown beams. Yumiya took a deep breath as she was lulled by the glittery ambience. I could get used to this. But before she was consumed by blissful sleep, a heinous stench filled her nostrils. Shame overcame Yumiya as she felt the liquid warmth spread across her nether regions. I wet myself again. Disgusting. She lamented as she opened her eyes wide, the sense of dread overwhelming her. Yumiya struggled in her soiled mess as the gravity of her situation finally twisted into the forefront of her mind, making the reeking mess of her filled diaper worse. Who am I kidding? How could I have thought anything good is going to come out of this? Especially with who my family is. How could I not think of the tragedy that awaits me? Can I really make Itachi love me enough to spare me? At this rate, I am not going to survive my second puberty. How am I even going to complete my end of the deal when Massacre is going to kill me before my new life even begins? Tears fell from her eyes as she let out a wail, covering her face with her pudgy hands as she wept at her situation. So many people are going to be killed by Itachi. How can I save anyone when I don't even know how to save myself? Without warning, the door to her room slid open. Yumiya flinched at the sudden noise, her eyes like saucers when she moved her hands down to see a disgruntled Fugaku enter the room. His bags and creases under his eyes looked more pronounced against the light that flowed into the room from the bright hallway, his eyebrows scrunched together as he hastily walked toward her. He was no longer in his work uniform. Instead, he wore a deep green kimono that was white at the hem with gray pants. Gray pants. Don't look at me like that. What happened to your concern for me the last time I saw you? She sniffed before coughing at the disgusting fumes her diaper emitted. I am here, so calm down. Do not cry yourself sick again, Fugaku grumbled, face morphing into a sneer at the smell. Yumiya felt tears return to her eyes as she gazed at Fugaku's sour expression. You think I am nothing but a burden, don't you? Huh? Well, it is not my fault I can't move. You are just like my father. And you have done much worse. You raised a monster. A monster who is going to kill us all if I don't do something. She watched as he lowered the wooden side of the crib and took out a clean cloth diaper and other supplies. Her face turned red as Fugaku turned her legs and began the process of changing her, his careful hands quickly unraveling the soiled cloth off of her. Yumiya couldn't help but sob as he changed her with the skillful hand of someone who changed diapers hundreds of times. Fugaku let out a sigh of relief after he flung the dirty diaper into the waste bin and put away the other materials. She didn't even notice that her guardian was done changing her until he picked her up. Shoo, Yumiya, it is all right. You are clean now, Fugaku stated as he put her head on his shoulder. Yumiya didn't even try to understand what he said. She was too caught up in the feeling of being violated. I don't want to get used to this. I am an adult. You hear me? An adult. I can't do this. I can't be like this anymore. She only cried harder as she began her inner rampage, beating her small fists against Fugaku's shoulder as she screamed. Fugaku began to pace around the room, rubbing Yumiya's back as she continued her fit. What am I going to do with you? With lungs like yours, anyone would think you are as healthy as any other baby, he grumbled with a humorless laugh, swaying as he walked back and forth. The gall of people. To say to my wife's face that you are intellectually stunted before you even said your first word. First the rumors of another war and now this? Will I ever catch a break, father? A voice called. Is Yumiya alright? Fugaku turned his head to see Itachi peeking his small head into the room, eyes wide and reflecting the concern in his voice. Yes. She is fine, he told his son simply, not missing a beat in his swaying pacing. But, she sounds really hurt, Itachi fretted as he gripped the doorway. I know Yumiya does, but the smallest things can set a baby off. And sometimes babies just cry because they need to cry. You were like this too when we first brought you home from the hospital. I was? Itachi asked, walking into the room towards his father and grabbed his leg. Yes, you were. The moment Mikoto brought you into this house, you cried for hours. New scents and surrounds can be overwhelming for a newborn, Fugaku said, using the hand that he was rubbing Yumiya's back with to shuffle Itachi's hair. Okay, Itachi replied with a small smile, putting his hand on his head. He looked over at the still screeching Yumiya. Do you think a pacifier would help her calm down? That new trinket? I almost forgot about that thing. They were around when you were a baby. We made you suck on cow bones and cloth soaked in milk. Now, where is it? Fugaku began to go through the bag under Yumiya's crib before taking a pink rubber one out. Yumiya's eyes opened wide with shock the moment Fugaku popped it into her mouth and cursed herself as she gave in to the impulse to suck the pacifier. She turned her head to see Fugaku's relieved expression and Itachi's bright smile. Yumiya stopped crying. Itachi cheered, grabbing Fugaku's sleeve before going on his toes to have a closer look at his sister. Yumiya stared back at Itachi's bright black eyes, confused. When did he get in here? And why does he look so happy? She flinched as Fugaku gently wiped her tear-stricken face with his sleeve. Fugaku replied as he kneeled down so that Itachi could get a better look at his sister. Once Fugaku was down to Itachi's level, Itachi hesitantly rubbed Yumiya's head, making her brow knit together as he continued to touch her. Time for bed, Fugaku ordered a few moments later, lifting himself up as he did. Ah, Itachi voiced quietly, clutching the bottom hem of his shirt. Now or I will not help you train tomorrow, Fugaku commanded more sternly, making Itachi's eyes widen before scurrying out of the room. He watched as his son left the room, his stern sneer slowly shifting into a grave frown. So innocent. If a war does happen, I am going to have to beat that out of him, he sighed to himself before looking down at a frowning Yumiya. You didn't have to yell at him, you know. By far, you are the worst father ever. You neglect Sasuke when he is born and the massacre was your fault. You must have done something wrong to cause Itachi to become a ruthless murderer. Yumiya's mind went blank when she noticed Fugaku blink back tears, but one quickly escaped despite his efforts, making him quickly wipe it away before clearing his throat. He turned his head to the open window and gazed at the full moon now high in the sky. "I will beat it out of both of you, starting with Itachi," he faltered, almost at a loss. Was that a tear? But Fugaku never cried in the entire manga. Why now of all times? Why now? The answer to her endless string of questions eluded as Fugaku lightly stroked Yumiya's nose with a finger and swayed her into restless dreams. One word that Yumiya described herself as during the coming months was determined. Nothing like a good cry to lift the spirits. Days turned to weeks, and weeks turned months, but the likes of time didn't deter her from her goal. Just like that, more than a year had passed. Most of her days were met by her helplessly doing sloppy arm and leg exercises in her crib or assessing the flames she sees when she closes her eyes. On rare occasions, Mikoto would take her out to the hospital. She hated the hospital days, having to be poked and prodded to check something that she knew little about. But that didn't make her lose confidence either, for the first step she strove for was a simple one. Today's the day. Yumiya cheered in her head as she stood triumphantly in her crib, hands on her hips. I'll finally walk out of this stupid room. Getting Naka's eyes will be a hop, skip, and a jump away. She felt her legs tremble under her before she lost her footing, making her hold onto the wooden rail to catch herself. Or maybe just crawl. I can hop to my goals later. She nervously chuckled before closing her eyes, sensing if anyone was around. She felt a sense of pride that she could now sense the people around her more accurately through all of her practice. Itachi is not home and Mikoto is nowhere near my room. Perfect. Yumiya opened her eyes and gleefully looked over the edge of her crib and at the tatami mat floor, rubbing her itchy gums together as she did it. Okay, Diana, it is not that far down. The crib only seems high. She thought before taking a deep breath. 1, 2, 3, Yumiya whispered to herself in English before lifting her leg over the ledge with her body, drool sliding out of her mouth. She held the railing as she reached for the floor with her toes, her hands slipping off from it after she dangled for a few seconds. Yumiya let out a gasp the moment her butt hit the floor. She quickly wiped her mouth and looked toward the partially opened bedroom door and sighed when she didn't hear any footsteps. She turned herself over and slowly crept out of her room and down the vacant hallway. She stopped at the stairs and grit her gums. Dang it, how could I forget the stairs? Yumiya, you escaped your crib. Mikoto gasped from behind her, sounding unexpectedly jubilant. And now I've been caught. Curses. Why is it that I can only sense people when I close my eyes? She turned to her guardian and squealed with delight, knowing that Mikoto loved to hear it. Face the wrath of my cuteness. How can my thoughtless baby self get into trouble? Yumiya let out the happiest laugh that she could muster as her guardian picked her up into her caring arms. Oh, little Yumiya. Stairs can be very dangerous, but Mama will protect you. Can you say Mama? Mikoto asked as she walked down the stairs. Everyone knows that babies walk before they talk. I will not be some prodigy. That just screams early death. It is hard enough to understand Japanese when I only hear it in your sparse conversations. And you all speak so fast. Yumiya's mouth opened slightly as she stared into Mikoto's expectant eyes, a feeling of guilt flashing through her. I must appease her at least. Yumiya gave Mikoto a slobbery kiss on the cheek before letting out loud giggles that permeated throughout the house. Mikoto just gave a small smile in return. You will get it eventually, she chuckled as she reached the bottom of the stairs and walked past the entryway of the house. The moment that Mikoto stepped into the living room, the front door behind them opened. I'm home, Itachi called as he came in. Welcome home, Mikoto replied with a smile, quickly turning around to look at her son. How was training? Yumiya waved happily at Itachi, making him smile a little. Her smile faltered when she noticed the purple bruises on his body and sweat dripping down his brow. You always look like you've just got the crap beaten out of you. You're already training to be a killer, but don't worry. I will be the perfect little sister. I will love that killing intent out of you. Well, Itachi voiced as he entered the living room. I finally hit the center of 3 targets at the same time with my kunai. Great job, Itachi. Mikoto cooed before looking as if she remembered something. I have some errands to run. Will you be a good big brother and watch Yumiya for a bit? Give her some mashed tomatoes while you are at it. It is just about lunchtime. Okay, Itachi replied lightly, his expression neutral. He reached his hands out to take Yumiya, and Mikoto happily obliged. Yumiya wrapped her pudgy baby arms around Itachi as she was situated on his hip, knowing whatever request Mikoto made Itachi extremely determined with the way his dark eyes sparkled. When will you be back? Itachi asked as he watched Mikoto put on her sandals. Just in time for dinner. Your lunch is in the fridge. Wow. If only Mikoto was a more attentive parent. Leaving your 4-year-old son to take care of his baby sister is a whole other level of wrong. Yumiya sighed as Mikoto closed the door behind her and looked up at Itachi. What am I going to do with you? Itachi clutched Yumiya in his arms while he stared longingly at the front door before a distinct growl came from both of their stomachs, making him blink out of his thoughts. Rawr! Yumiya yelled cheerfully, patting Itachi's tummy. Itachi couldn't help but let out a tiny laugh. It's time for lunch. Say, lunch. LNCH, he said as slow and articulate as he could. Yumiya blinked her teardrop eyes at her brother as he patiently waited for a reply. I am not going to talk to you either until I successfully take my first steps. I'll give you a distraction kiss as well. She then let out a coo before kissing his nose, making Itachi back his head away with surprise. Itachi then walked into the kitchen with his bubbly little sister, looking disappointed. He then placed Yumiya on one of the seat cushions on the low table before walking over to the fridge to get his plate of food and her tomato. Ugh! I hate mashed tomatoes. She crossed her arms as Itachi retrieved a small bowl from the cabinet and began mashing the red fruit into a bloody mesh. Yumiya kicked her legs up and down on the cushion and watched her brother take a spoonful of tomato and put it toward her mouth. She frowned at the mesh. Say ah, Itachi instructed as he brought the spoon to her mouth, smiling cutely at her sour expression. Why do the Uchiha love tomatoes so much? I am so done with them and nursing. She shuddered at the thought. Nursing? I have lost my love for food. Yumiya would always be thankful for Amaterasu leaving her memories, but having her old life and this life be in so much clarity was as much of a blessing as a curse. Come on, Yumiya. You have to eat. It's not so bad. See? Itachi took a bite and exaggeratedly rubbed his tummy as he swallowed the mush. Yum! Now it is your turn. He stirred the mashed tomatoes and scooped up a hearty helping of it to her. Ah! Yumiya turned her head away from the spoon and toward Itachi's salad dish. Do you think you can manipulate me like that? I am not some stupid baby. I am an adult within a baby. Well, if you like that slop so much, I can just take some of your food. Yumiya got up from her cushion as quickly as she could and snatched a slice of pork from Itachi's plate and put it in her mouth. No, my food! He cried, hastily putting down the bowl and jump on Yumiya and to make her spit the food out. Come on, spit it out. You are going to choke. Yumiya cried as she tried her best to chew on the sliver of meat with her toothless mouth. Get off me. This is the best thing I have ever had since I was born into this world. The tangy flavor of the sauce on the tender piece of pork kept Yumiya's mouth glued shut while Itachi tried his best to pry her mouth open. It wasn't until Itachi used his strength to pinch Yumiya's cheeks that she spit the food out. Ah! She cried as held her reddened cheeks. Bad Yumiya. Stealing is wrong. Never do that again. Itachi scowled with a shaking finger after he cleaned up the chewed-up pork. Worth it. But my cheeks are throbbing, you big meanie. Don't cry, me. Come on, it wasn't that hard. Yumiya felt tears fill her eyes that didn't leave no matter how many times she tried to blink them away. Itachi's expression softened when tears started to fall from her big eyes. I didn't mean to pinch you that hard, Yumiya. Please don't cry. You are too small to eat solid food. Why, you really could have choked and died. I'll make you something else. Something better than tomato puree. Hold on and don't touch my food. Itachi stammered, quickly getting up into the kitchen. Yumiya watched Itachi leave, wiping the tears from her eyes, feeling bewildered. Where is that boy going? First, you pinch me silly and now you run away? I know that I took some of your food but still. I was going to save this sweet potato for later, but I think you will like it better, Itachi told Yumiya as he walked back into the room, mixing the warm bowl of mashed potatoes in his hand. Yumiya looked down at the bowl with a sniff, feeling her stomach grumble at the smell. Looks good enough, but don't think I forgive you for pinching me like Hyo Basin. She opened her mouth and Itachi gently placed it into her mouth. Her eyes began to sparkle. Yumiya cheered as she ate it, thinking that it tasted better than she thought. Itachi ruffled her dark brown hair that touched her shoulders and ate his food while he continued to feed her. After they finished their meal, he then cleaned up after them both and carried her to the living room, putting her down at one end of the room and situating himself on the other side. He then clapped his hands and ushered her to him. Come here, Yumiya. Come here. He beckoned as he continued his movements. Yumiya just stared at Itachi as he called her over, debating on listening or turn to the partially opened door behind Itachi. I want to go outside. I might suck at escaping, but at least it is better than doing nothing. Screw this baby body and screw tomatoes more. Itachi's eyes glistened as he watched Yumiya crawl towards him, his gestures becoming more animated. His expression shifted into one of confusion. He watched his little sister crawl around him and towards the door that leads outside and into the courtyard. Of course, he couldn't let Yumiya have her way, so he swiftly grabbed her in his small but tough arms, his sister struggling desperately in his grip. Let me go! Let me go! She wiggled her pudgy legs and pointed at the door while letting out childish whines, her shame for how readily she gave into her baby emotions and desires long lost. Take me outside! She cried in English. Itachi held her close until she tired herself out, English words disregarded as gibberish. When Yumiya was reduced to small whimpers and sniffs from newly formed tears, he turned his sister to face him. Yumiya, whining like that will get you nowhere in life, Itachi fretted as he wiped Yumiya's tears with his sleeve as she sniffed. He glanced at the now slightly ajar door, rocking his little sister. Let's take a walk. I'll take you to my favorite place. That will make you happy. Yumiya couldn't stop herself from squealing as loud as she could the moment Itachi wrapped her up in a sling and stepped outside. She clapped her hands and flung them around in celebration while he walked her through the compound, summer heat kissing her face. Itachi ignored the glances of passers-by and their reactions to Yumiya's antics and wore a blank expression on his face. Yumiya stared owlishly at familiar sights and enjoying the fresh air. No matter how many times she was taken outside, it felt as exciting as the first. The trees, the pulses, everything. She waved at the people who looked their way, overjoyed to see people other than her new family. A small part of her was worried about the tense atmosphere, but it was overpowered by the simple fact that she was outside. She closed her eyes to the wind that caressed her face and took a deep breath as it passed them by. They eventually left the village part of the district and walked down a wooded path. Yumiya trembled at the unpredictable depths of the looming trees. Why are we going deeper into the woods? We could get killed or worse, kidnapped. Itachi, we need to go back, she thought with a whimper, tugging at his shirt. Itachi looked down at his sister, confused by the shift in mood. He rocked her a little, assessing the situation. She doesn't smell like anything, and she just ate. Is she thirsty? Itachi muttered as he took out a scroll, popping out a warm bottle of milk from it. Yumiya gasped at the sudden smoke that emitted from the scroll, momentarily forgetting her sudden worries. She saw the bottle in her brother's hand, which made her feel very thirsty, and motioned to the bottle with her mouth open. Itachi happily put the bottle into her mouth before continuing down the forest path. A few moments later, he strayed from the path and went into the depths of the forest, dodging stray branches and roots with ease. Yumiya couldn't voice her concerns due to the bottle in her mouth and resigned to her fate. The sound of rushing water echoed in Yumiya's ears before Itachi entered the clearing. The water sounds came from a rampant river that flowed like no tomorrow at the bottom of a cliff where they resided, granite rocks glistening in its clear water. Waterfalls surrounded them and ran down towards its depths in front of them, trickles spraying in their faces, making Yumiya shiver. The trees and mountain views along the river looked greener, leaves glistening as birds chirp. Did you bring me here just to cheer me up? She looked up at Itachi and felt an intense pang. The look on her brother's face was the complete opposite of what it would be in a few years if nothing changed. Itachi's eyes closed as he listened to the sounds of nature all around them, the sense of complete serenity encompassing his very being. Isn't it beautiful, Yumiya? I found this place while wandering, he told his sister whimsically before looking down at her. I can stay here for, Yumiya, what's wrong? Yumiya's dark eyes had fresh tears prickling at the edge of her eyes as she stared up at her brother. Itachi, she wailed, hoping that she won't regret it. Itachi's eyes widened in shock at his name being called before revealing a childish grin. Yes. My name is Itachi. Say it again. Say Itachi. Itachi. He cheered as he wiped the tears off her face. I swear to help you make more happy memories. So much so that you never snap. Itachi, Happy Pyui, Yumiya stammered, hoping that she didn't botch what she wanted to tell him. Itachi jumped high in the air with glee. Yes. You said your first word and sentence on the same day. You're a genius, Yumiya. A genius. I knew that talking to you would work. I can't wait to tell Mom. She will be ecstatic. I really hope Dad is home as well. He was so worried that you might be mute because you never called him Papa, and he didn't believe me when I told him that you were just waiting for the right time to speak. he rambled while rubbing his head against hers. I promise to take you here as much as I can and talk to you until you can talk even better than me. By the time Itachi and Yumiya reached the front door of their home, Yumiya's head was swirling with how much Itachi talked to her on the way there. She sighed as she looked up at the sky, the sun falling bringing forth the night, golden hour. Itachi burst into the house and ran toward the light of the kitchen until shouts erupting from the kitchen made him stop. Yumiya flinched at the loud voices and felt two pulses blazing from there. Itachi slowly walked closer toward the kitchen, arms trembling as he held Yumiya close. He then kneeled and peeked through the small opening in the open door. You are not taking our child into the battlefield with you. You can't. He is too young. Our baby is barely even 4 years old. Mikoto cried as she slammed her hand on the counter, the liquid in the pot boiling next to her. The was is not looking good on our end and Itachi needs to learn the truth about life as a ninja. He can't run around believing that they are all heroes whose sole purpose is to protect the innocent, Fugaku replied, his voice evenly relentless. But that is exactly why Itachi needs to be protected within these walls. How are going to protect him out there with your hand full? Itachi has not even trained in the academy. I cannot stand by you on this. I cannot. What do the clan elders think of this lunacy? There was an attack within the village walls hours ago. Nowhere is safe. The elders have already agreed upon this decision and there is no changing it. The sooner Itachi gains the desperation to become the best he can be, the better. There was a moment of silence as Mikoto turned around, lowering the heat of the soup and stirring it. Itachi, it is not appropriate to eavesdrop on our conversations. Enter, Fugaku ordered, turning his head toward the door and glaring into Itachi's eyes. I'm sorry, Itachi said immediately, entering the kitchen, his cheery demeanor replaced with one that was apprehensive. Give Yumiya to me, Fugaku beckoned, uncrossing his arms to take Yumiya out of Itachi's warm embrace and into his cold. Fugaku's eyes were deprived of any light mixed with his grave expression as if he wasn't completely present mentally. Even though her guardian was wearing his yukata with no blood and ash in sight, a hint of those smells perturbed into Yumiya's nose, defiling the aroma of whatever Mikoto was cooking. Tears formed in her eyes as pieces of the puzzle came together. What is going on here? Whatever it is, it has to stop. Yumiya couldn't stop the tears that flowed from her eyes as she cried out, for that was all that she could do about the situation. Mikoto didn't turn her head from the stove and continued to stir the contents in the pot as Yumiya screamed to the high heavens. Itachi, clean yourself up and get ready for dinner, it is almost ready, she told him with an artificial calm, clutching the large spoon in her hand. And pack your things. We leave at dawn, Fugaku instructed, voice hoarse as he rocked Yumiya. Fugaku, please. This. Fugaku sent a wrathful glare at his wife and they stared into each other's eyes for a second, as if they were having a conversation that no one but them would understand. Mikoto looked down at her pot and stirred its contents solemnly in defeat. Mikoto wiped her face with her hand and kept her face toward the pot. Itachi lifted his hand and looked like he was about to say something but stopped himself. Yes, Itachi whispered before following his Fugaku's instruction. Yumiya rubbed her eyes before looking around her room, feeling the strain from her crying. I hate arguing. Especially when my parents did and now they are too. She turned over to her side, her trembling hand brushing something softly knitted. Yumiya hastily grabbed for it and held it close. She whispered as she took a whiff of the cat doll before chewing on its ear. Her small muscles relaxed and her hands stilled as the calming aroma of flowers with a lemony undertone filled her nose. This smells wonderful. I wonder where it comes from. She thought wearily, almost closing her eyes before a thought stopped her. Did Mikoto make Itachi a comforting doll like this as well? Yumiya pulled Chi away from her and stared at its black yarn body and touched the cold metal button eyes. Itachi needs this doll more than I do. Yumiya looked around her darkroom. The stars twinkled faintly outside her window as if to take pity on her, for there was no moon to guide her. With her cat doll still in hand, she struggled herself up into a sitting position before closing her eyes, feeling the continuous channels that drifted throughout the house. Two large flames pulsed harmoniously together while a smaller one, farther away, pulsed like crazy. Good, no one is around. But Itachi's flame is concerning. Her stomach fluttered with guilt as she grabbed the rail of her crib and used it as leverage to stand up. She looked down at Chi, the outline of its red button eyes staring back. Well Chi, time to put the plan, comfort Itachi, into action, she whispered to her doll, making Chi nod in reply. With this plan in mind, Yumiya pulled her stubby legs over the ledge of her crib with as much uncoordinated grace as she could muster and flopped on the matted ground with Chi the doll landing next to her on its head. She winced when she hit the floor, rubbing her behind with a hiss. She quickly checked on the pulses to make sure she didn't catch anyone's attention. Itachi's flame was still erratic like it was on steroids while Mikoto's and Fugaku's molded into one. This made her do a double take. Did Mikoto's and Fugaku's flames just combine? Does this mean, you know what, I'll just leave that be. Focus on the task at hand. Task at hand. Yumiya shook her head while she crawled towards her giant bedroom door and huffed as she slowly stood up and grabbed the door. She felt thankful for the lightness of the material as she slid the door open, with relative ease, then crawling onto the cool dark wooden floors. Yumiya scurried down the hallway and made it to Itachi's bedroom door, which was only a few doors down. She paused at the door and let out a sigh, feeling the muscles in her arms and legs ache. Screw this weak body, Yumiya lamented as she slid the door open. A part of her regretted opening the door so quickly when she watched Itachi jump at the sound of the door opening. He turned hastily to the sound and his piercing black eyes softened when they made contact with her soft ones. Yumiya bit her lip when she saw the assortment of weapons that surrounded her brothers with a sharpening stone right in front of him. You look like you are preparing for battle. Are you going on a long camping trip or something? Yumiya forced herself to etch a smile across her face, sensing that something was off ever since their parents' argument. Ita! She cheered, crawling into the plain room towards her brother. Yumiya, what are you doing here? Hungry? Bad dream? Itachi asked slowly, putting his weapons and bag out of her reach at the speed of light. Yumiya tilted her head as she grasped at the Japanese words that she understood and morphed them into a sentence in her mind. Na-ah, she voiced, shaking her head and put her hands up in the universal sign of wanting to be held, chi dangling in one hand. Big Ita. Itachi gave Yumiya a sad smile before he walked over to pick her up. You were just lonely, he stated, his assumption not quite right. Now in Itachi's arms, she pushed Chi into his face making sniffing noises. He gently pushed the doll away, shoulders relaxing after the fragrance from the doll came into contact with his nose. Yes, Yumiya, your doll smells good. Did you know that its smell is from the wood of the hinoki trees and lotus flowers? Itachi asked sweetly. Hinoki and lotus? Yes, hinoki and lotus. Good job. The green of the trees contrasts nicely with the pink flowers. They are grown at the Naka shrine. There is even a massive flower field near it. I'll show you after I come back from my adventure with Dad, he rambled to Yumiya with strained optimism, slowly pacing around his room while doing a swaying motion like Fugaku did to put Yumiya to sleep. She whimpered at that, cursing her lack of understanding. She leaned her head on his shoulder. No, she whispered, clutching his shirt and putting Chi under her nose. No go, yes go. We never refuse Mom and Dad. Never, Itachi replied simply, now sitting on his bed with her tiny frame in his lap, his legs dangling off the edge. Yumiya continued her whine, letting a few tears fall from her puppy dog eyes. Shoo, don't cry. Sorry, Yumiya. This is just how things are. I am sure that we will understand why when we are older. At least, that is what Mom always says when grown-up things confuse me, he told Yumiya before letting out a yawn and rubbing his eyes cutely. Can't later go? Itachi shook his head. If it makes you feel better, you can sleep with me tonight, he said, situating himself next to her and blowing out the dimly lit candle. Yumiya turned to her side and watched her brother lay under the covers, face looking up at the blank ceiling before closing his eyes. She held her doll out to Itachi. Chi keep. He looked down at the doll and nodded before scooting close to wrap his arms around her and the doll like a child to a teddy bear before going to sleep. She felt the pulse of fire in his stomach slow as he breathed in the fragrance Chi emitted into the air until lulled to sleep. At least I successfully calmed him down. Yumiya felt a pit in her stomach. She wanted to stay up as long as possible and relish in the peaceful moment they would have together but succumbed to the serene ambience. When she awoke, she found herself back in her crib with Chi and Itachi gone. And in his absence, she wept. Not even the birds sang that morning. Weeks passed since that night with no sign of Itachi nor Fugaku. With every passing day, Yumiya's worries increased. Yumiya swung her legs over the ledge of the engawa that faced the tall fence courtyard. With a sense of dread, Yumiya noticed a few people pass by, their flames fearfully mourning with every step. Her family's chickens clucked while picking at the ground below her. Where did Fugaku and Itachi go for so long? They're not going to die, but are they in danger? Are they hurt? She moved her hand over eyes as a cloud glided through the sky to reveal the sun. Ugh! Just looking up at the clear blue sky annoying. Its light beaming down on everything is so jarring. Bad things shouldn't be happening on good days like this. There you are, Yumiya. Do you like watching the chickens play? Mikoto cooed, picking up Yumiya from behind. Yumiya turned and looked at her guardian with a giggling smile, trying not to flinch at how the state of their family was taking a toll on her. Mikoto's eyes were purplish, baggy, and sunken with her pale skin turned ash white. Her usual silky tresses were now scattered, oily strands webbed against her cheeks. Wherever they are, they need to hurry back. To make Mikoto like this, it can be something as mundane as a camping trip. Please be okay, Itachi. Yumiya replied, making Mikoto smile and kiss her on the cheek. Yumiya frowned at the sourness in Mikoto's breath. We are going to visit your great-grandparents at the Naka Shrine. Grandmother has been wanting to introduce you to your grandfather, Mikoto hummed, swaying to the front door to put her sandals on. You no good. Can't go day? Yumiya asked as she was carried out the door and onto the mostly deserted compound, dust fluttering in the warm breeze. Mikoto only hummed and looked ahead, heedless of her daughter's question and the dirt caking her sandals as she dragged her feet. Yumiya was about to ask again, but her head began to throb. She tried to cry out but her body went limp as her vision became disjointed. In her daze, her thoughts began to dwell on things other than what lay before her. Back her mind went, onto things she thought long forgotten, something from before emerged. Diana sweet. The best part is about to start. Get out of that little world of yours and enjoy our mother-daughter time. Mom? Yumiya called inside herself, her body going cold as she watched her form before her. She could see every freckle scattered across her pale skin with her light auburn curls puffed around her round face. She wore her usual floral dress that hung loosely against her slim frame. Yumiya's heart ached as she tried to reach out to touch her but some force stopped her. She could only stare into her mom's hazelnut eyes. But I already know what happened in this play. Can't we watch a different one on the TV? I heard Cats is good. It's the one with the song, Memory, in it. You love that song. Yumiya found herself arguing as if this was another of their conversations about the play she was made to watch over and over when she was a little girl, her light brown hair in fishtail pigtails with bright ribbons and all. The trees swayed and the TV buzzed in her childhood home. Rays of sunshine shined in her eyes while the AC blared cool air from above. It was warm in Mikoto's arms. It was warm on her mom's couch. Hogwash. Her mom boomed with laughter, giving Yumiya her usual dimpled smile. Cats is just a play about cats doing mystical cat stuff. Better than watching fairytale fanfiction, Diana complained, not able to control herself, aching to hold her mom one last time. Her mom chuckled, caressing Diana's freckled cheek. You cheeky brat. You have to look past that. It is a play about life's challenges. One day, you will get hit with an unexpected life-changing event with no guarantee of success. You will thank me when the time comes and understand the wisdom this play sneaks in. But, it's my favorite song. Stop your complaining and sing it with me. We can watch Cats next time, but there won't be the next time. Diana's mom began to sing along to the prologue song as the characters dimly danced along on the screen, moving up and down on the couch while moving her head side to side. She wrapped her arms tightly around Yumiya, beckoning for her to sing with her. The birds chirped around Yumiya as she heard her mom's voice flutter with the characters. She began to hum the tune, Tears Forming. That is a lovely song you are humming, Yumiya. I must be the luckiest mom in the world, Mikoto cheered with a true smile, the skip in her step furthering Yumiya out of her painful haze. In the blazing light, her mom's voice quickly faded into her mind, her cool home leaving with her, leaving her eyes burning. She rubbed them as fresh tears started to flow down her cheeks. Mom! Yumiya gasped with her baby hands reaching out for the fading vision she wished more than anything to be with, frantically looking around. Mikoto ruefully smiled at her daughter, rocking her gently. Shh. It's okay, Yumiya. New places can be scary, but it's not always as it seems. This is the safest place for us, she told Yumiya before continuing into the clearing. Yumiya took deep breaths, trying to calm her questionable state of mind, wanting nothing more than to sleep off the void that was forming in her stomach. Mom, I still don't completely understand what you meant but thank you. I miss you so much, she mourned, eyes still burning relentlessly. The dirt path quickly shifted to gray granite cobblestones as Yumiya and Mikoto made their way closer to their destination. It soon came into view. The Naka Shrine was a sight to behold. It reminded Yumiya of one of the Shinto shrines she saw in a documentary about Japan in her past life. The red and silver torii gleamed proudly with its Uchiha symbol towering above them. Hinoki trees surrounded the shrine with a whole forest of them behind it. Mikoto walked up the stone steps to the gate and gave a customary bow to it, leaving Yumiya slightly bewildered. She took off her shoes before entering. In the distance, someone stood in front of the shrine's main building waiting for them, his flames seemingly non-existent. As they got closer to the building, Yumiya noticed that it was an elderly man in priestly deep red garb, embroidered with black lotuses, white hair combed up in his black hat. The weary man leaned heavily on his wooden cane and smiled kindly, his mouth contrasting against his deep frown lines on his saggy wrinkled face, making him look almost decrepit. Yumiya's dark eyes widened when she looked into his eyes. The priest's eyes contrasted with each other, one was a foggy white while the other a piercing black. "Grandfather," Mikoto greeted him with a bow. The elderly man's eyes flashed wide before he covered it up by smiling wider before waving his hands in distinct-looking signs. "Sign language? Is my great-granddad deaf and blind in one eye? His life must be difficult, especially in this universe." Yumiya stared up at him, which made the man rub her head and take her out of Mikoto's arms. "It has been a while. Where is grandmother? I need to talk to her," Mikoto told her grandfather as she handed Yumiya to him. Mikoto's grandfather seemed to understand because he simply motioned for her to follow him before walking into the shrine, his cane echoing with each step. Mikoto obeyed and entered the traditional-looking shrine. Yumiya couldn't help but gape at the architecture inside. The walls were adorned with detailed art of an elegantly clothed Naka with many other spirits and gods, each making different poses with hand signs. On the ceiling, it depicted a story with a script she could not decipher, its writings familiar, but she couldn't figure out from where. In the center of the shrine was a painted statue of the Naka, looking nothing like the enraged goddess she made a deal with. Naka's obsidian hair was done up in a golden crown that looked like a halo with gem lotus flower pins. She wore a two-piece dress that had the signature loose turtleneck, revealing a jeweled necklace. The outfit she wore revealed her belly that had the same lotus as Yumiya's birthmark. Her serene face had makeup on similar to Hyo Basin, the red of her lips and eyeliners vibrant on her white face. She cradled a black flame lovingly in her ringed hands, situated where chakra was centered, pulsing eerily like a heartbeat. Looking at the stature, Yumiya knew that the Naka she met was the shadow of her previous self. A few people were kneeling before the flame, praying, and giving offerings. The black flame oddly didn't emit smoke when the fruits and flowers were thrown in, only disappeared within the flame with not even the scent remaining. Yumiya frowned as she was taken away from the altar and down a hallway with many closed doors on the sides. "So that is where I need to put her eyes once I find them." Mikoto's grandfather slid one of the doors open and ushered Mikoto inside. An office greeted them filled with different knickknacks and books in the wooden shelves behind a low desk cluttered with scrolls, the room smelling like old wood and ink with a hint of lotus. Yumiya marveled at the details of her great-grandmother's priestess robes, wondering how long it took to though they were the same colors as Mikoto's grandfather, they were far more extravagant. The embroidery showcased a landscape even more mystical than the one Yumiya was in now. Land of blood red, lotuses bloomed from below and up into the shining sun while crows were in mid-flight with some in the hinoki trees. On Hyo Basin's head seated a golden crown with jewels that formed into different flowers and leaves with a large crystal orb on the top. "Oh, I didn't notice you all enter. It is so good to see you. Come and have a seat. Thank you for bringing them in, dear husband," Hyo Basin said in a wearily sweet voice, signing elegantly as she talked. "I see that you brought little Yumiya with you. She has grown up so much since I saw her." She went behind her desk and gracefully kneeled on the cushion and gestured for the others to do the same on the other side of it. Yumiya whimpered as she stared up at her great-grandfather, feeling the flames of Mikoto roar with intensity. She wondered how her great-grandparents could look so calm when her guardian's flame was trying to engulf them. Mikoto's grandfather only closed his eyes and began to rock Yumiya gently. "No need for such formalities. We are family, after all. Now, why has my granddaughter come to me now after all this time?" Hyo Basin asked, hands in her sleeves. "Have you not read my letter? I want to start planning Yumiya's initiation into the shrinehood. It is, never too early to. Do not try to mask it like usual. No avoiding it with me. Look at you, you're a mess. Have you been drinking?" Hyo Basin leaned forward and tilted her head. "It is about Itachi, isn't it?" Yumiya froze when she heard his name mentioned. "Itachi? Why are they talking about him?" Is he alright? Grandmother, please. I am fine and understand what happened. So please. I couldn't stop it, but the other elders agreed to Fugaku's request. I tried so hard to get him and the other children away from the battlefield, but the army needed as many hands as they could get for this war. The other elders refused to listen to reason. Please stop. Ninjas are being sent out to fight younger and younger, some barely out of diapers. Not even clan children are safe. Look at the Hitaki. The only one left and graduated at 5 years old, too smart for his own good, and too devout for his own protection. His self-preservation was beaten out of him, dearie. Beaten out. We are killing off our future generations, and for what? Another war? In all the wars I have lived through, the children were protected while their elders went out to fight. Not like this. Not dying on the front lines. So many able civilian men are loitering about here while we are losing babies, sending them out to the slaughter to fill the gaps. It's asinine, dearie. Ludicrous. Hyo Basin cried, her straight back morphing into a slouch, looking more her age. I wish that we could finally have peace, at least for one generation. If only that prayer could be answered. If only, grandmother. Mikoto exploded, making everyone flinch. Please. She trembled as her Sharingan activated before sagging her shoulders in defeat. I know, but it is too late for me to do anything about it. I didn't come here to be reminded about what we can't control. I thought I knew of the sacrifices I had to make when I married Fugaku, but how could I have been so blind? Mikoto sobbed, putting her head into her hands. To think my children have to sacrifice themselves this young? All for the sake of what? Peace? Yumiya reached out her shaking hand to her Mikoto and grabbed her shirt. I should have known. Something did happen to Itachi. Mikoto turned toward her and wearily smiled down at her. Her great-grandfather put a hand on her shoulder after he handed Yumiya to his granddaughter. Mikoto snuggled Yumiya close. Hyo Basin sat there in contemplative silence as she watched her granddaughter rock Yumiya. Promise me one thing, grandmother? Hyo Basin pursed her lips. Yes. Anything for my only surviving granddaughter. Mikoto smiled as she looked up at Hyo Basin, wiping a tear. That Yumiya is the one who becomes a candidate to become a high priestess? Fugaku might force her to leave the shrine if she is to stay a shrine maiden and put her through a political marriage. At least with that stature, she can choose who she would be married to if she was to become a high priestess. Please, I can't save my son, but you can save my daughter, she begged as she bowed to her grandmother. Raise your head, child. I will do as you ask and more. Why, I will even train her myself when she is initiated, Hyo Basin resolved, getting up from her seat to go and lift Mikoto up and caress her cheek. You don't need to worry about Yumiya. She is sick but not dying. Yumiya will do well as a high priestess. Thank you, Mikoto whispered. Hyo Basin got up and went back to her desk. Now, I have to show you something, she told Mikoto as she looked around her desk. Our great mother has been giving me visions. Visions of a place where true peace for our clan resides. She told them, opening an empty scroll on a clearing on her desk and pointed to a specific spot. Hyo Basin activated her Sharingan. It is the place where we originated. Our homeland. The place of the original eternal flame. After years of meditation, Naka showed me that the entrance is somewhere in this area. Mikoto gasped when she looked at it while her grandfather watched from afar with his arms crossed. Grandmother. It will take years to get to, even at ninja speed. How will you go there when you are so frail? Frail? Hardly. Besides, I will reinstate the pilgrimages when this war ends. Uchiha were never meant to stay in one place for too long. Especially Uchiha of the shrine. Only we can spread Naka's blessings. But what about Yumiya? She is so weak and tiny. She would not last a day. Mikoto cried. Calm yourself. She might be weak now, but she will gain stamina with enough strength for travel. I am sure of it. She was blessed by the mark of Naka. And if she is not, I will have to ask someone else, Hyo Basin mused. While Hyo Basin was thinking, the doors to the office burst open. Everyone turned their heads to see a young shrine maiden jumping up and down before entering the room. Head priestess Anaisha, Canopy Bridge was successfully destroyed. The enemies are weakened. The war is now in our favor. The young maiden shouted, her pink flowing everywhere as she signed her words. There was a moment of silence. Yumiya stared at the girl with her mouth agape. Oh! The maiden gasps before bowing apologetically. I didn't mean to interrupt anything. I'll just leave and tell others. Yua wait. Hyo Basin called but Yua was already long gone, yelling as she went. Mikoto's grandfather signed something to Hyo Basin. Yes, and maybe we will find peace, Hyo Basin replied, looking down at Yumiya. But at what cost? Yumiya squinted her eyes at the sun that shone radiantly down at her face. She scooted back into the shade under the waving branches the tree above provided. On her lap was a light buff chicken. She slowly petted its black and white feathers with a gentle hand and looked at the massive flower field near the Naka shrine. Mikoto would not accept no for an answer when she told Yumiya that they were going back to the shrine, no matter how much she begged. Instead, her guardian decided to bring Yumiya's chicken, Tamago, with them. Yumiya thought that it was stupid at first, but it worked to calm her nerves. She heard Mikoto walking over, humming a little tune as she came closer. Yumiya looked up at her smiling guardian and glanced down at the flowers she gathered in her hands before looking at the field that surrounded them. A sea of wildflowers of all kinds wafted in the breeze that brushed by its vivid colors of reds, pinks, and purples. The clear sky with its blazing sun made its brilliance shimmer bright on the summer day. But even with the beautiful view and soft feathers, Yumiya's mind raged with thoughts of uncertainty. Not too far from the beautiful sight, the side of the Naka shrine gleamed tall. With it, thoughts of her future swirled to the forefront of her mind. Whatever gave Mikoto relief that day did not lessen Yumiya's sense of foreboding. Too much is going on. How many months has it been since I have heard from Fugaku and Itachi? 3, 4. Yumiya turned to Mikoto, who was now making a crown out of the flowers she picked, looking better than she had in weeks. She stared at her guardian's belly, hoping that what she drank in the past wouldn't affect him. And Sasuke is on the way. Fugaku, what the heck are you doing out there with Itachi? Making us worry so much? If you weren't gone, Mikoto wouldn't have drank and I wouldn't have to be stuck here wondering how much damage has been done to both of my brothers. With frustration brewing, she wrapped her arms around the chicken that was half her size. As she held the chubby bird close, a sharp pain pierced her heart, causing her to silently hiss and hug the chicken tighter. And these chest pains, shouldn't the medicine Mikoto's been giving me be relieving them? Yumiya, if you squeeze the chicken any tighter, she will surely pop. Yumiya jumped and turned her head to see Mikoto look down at her with a fretful smile, clutching the crown she was making finished in her hands. Oh, Yumiya replied dumbly as she looked down at the now struggling chicken in her grasp. Sorry Tamago. Tamago clucked and pecked Yumiya's hand in annoyance, making her jump and release the chicken, spitting out a few stray feathers that landed in her mouth. Luckily, the peck didn't break the skin. Yumiya haphazardly whipped the rest off herself before wrapping her arms around her knees and laying her face down on them. While wallowing, Yumiya felt something placed snugly on her head. She looked up at the petals that decorated her, its colorful assortment contrasting with her dark brown hair. Cheer up. Times have been tough, but the war is over, and your father and brother will be back any day now. Our days are going to be brighter. Yumiya nodded slowly, her eyebrow knit in frustration. What's over? Senso? That godforsaken word. Mama, what senso? Mikoto bit her lip and looked away before flinching in surprise. A smile spread across her face. She gently cupped Yumiya's cheeks, her eyes flashing red before pressing her daughter's face against the small bump on her belly. Can you feel it? Your sister is kicking. Mikoto cheered, rubbing Yumiya's head. Wait. But you, shoo, don't you want to hear your baby sister? Yumiya closed her eyes and sensed a small accumulating flame inside of Mikoto's belly, its rhythm in sync with her guardian's. Not she. He, she muttered. He? Mikoto chuckled. It would be nice for you to have a cute little sister, don't you think? Yumiya shook her head. It boy. I sure. She insisted. Mikoto chuckled before getting up from the shade. Do you want to help me pick more flowers? I am sure your father would love them. Really? Yumiya perked up, perplexed. Likes flowers? Mikoto bent over and put her finger over her lip. Just between you and me, your father adores flowers, especially sweet peas. I would make flower crowns for him all the time when we were younger and he looked just as good in them as you, she whispered with a wink. Yumiya couldn't help but giggle as thoughts of Fugaku wearing a sweet pea crown in the flower field filled her mind. Like a flower girl at a wedding. Promise not tell. She giggled. There's my beautiful smile. Come on, I'll show you where they are. Mikoto took Yumiya by the hand and began to walk into the sea of petals, its depths parting with every step they took. Yumiya felt more at ease with each step as pollen from the flowers caught onto her dress with the delightful aroma tickling her nose. She felt like she was floating, mind hazy with only thoughts of flowers. So beautiful. Wait, am I forgetting something? Ah, never mind. It will come back to me eventually. Then, in the middle of the field, a sharp pang stabbed her heart. Yumiya shouted in agony, clutching her chest that felt like it was going to burst. Everything around went from a hazy bliss to a dark foggy hell. She could hardly discern Mikoto's shouts from the ringing in her ears. Yumiya, stay with me now. The pain throbbed more intensely with every movement made. She felt heavy with the feeling of being carried. She instinctively wrapped her arms around Mikoto's neck. The trees passed her by in a blur, leaving her mind cloudy as well with her vision going black. The night sky was hazy, and the stars hardly twinkled in the sky. The only thing that illuminated the opaque sky was a full moon. Everything was silent, not even the fires that burned the buildings of Konoha made any noise. The place was empty, desolate, with no one in sight. Hello? Anyone there? Yumiya shouted as she walked down the barren road, anxiety filling her with every step. The only reply was her echoes into the thick fog. As she walked further down the road, the only signs of life were what death left of it. Blood was splattered in all directions under the rubble. Yumiya covered her mouth at the sight as the fog parted like the Red Sea, the smell of smoke mixing with burnt meat. By the second, more details of the scene became clear. Indecipherable bodies littered the village in tatters, stray limbs under rubble reaching out as if pleading for mercy. The desire to flee the sight engulfed her being, but no matter how much she tried to move, she was glued to the spot. Suddenly a roar erupted behind her, making Yumiya cover her ears in fright. She looked up at the source of the cries to see the Ninetales in all its wrathful glory, its murderous eyes staring through her. Its crimson fur burned her eyes as its tails whipped through the village with wreckage and screams in its wake. As one tail charged toward her, its name formed in her lips. Kyubi! Yumiya gasped as she hastily lifted herself up, grasping something soft as she went. She blinked and looked down at the four inside of her arm. It was just a dream, but I am in the hospital again. I wish this all was a dream. What's a Kyubi? Yumiya's body froze before turning to see who asked the question. Itachi leaned forward in his seat next to her hospital bed when he addressed her, his eyebrows scrunched, and head tilted slightly to the side. He seemed to have grown an inch since she last saw him with his black hair now down to his chin. He wore a black loose short-sleeved turtleneck and shorts. His clothes did not hide the traumas he received from his time away. Yumiya grimaced at the bandaged cheek and the bandages that went down his leg. The feeling of worry from his wounds mixed with the relief of his return filled Yumiya to the brim, making her eyes water. She could tell that Itachi had been through a lot. Her hands began to tremble as she looked at his baggy eyes. "Ita, where you been?" Yumiya cried before she opened her arms and flung herself onto him, making Itachi hastily wrap his arms around her. A part of her immediately regretted it as a wave of dizziness hit her, making it more like she fell into his arms instead of the initial hug. "Careful. You shouldn't get up so fast. Especially with your condition," he lectured, gently holding onto her before placing her back onto her bed with the softness that belied his strength. "Sorry," Yumiya murmured, hunching and rubbing her fingers. "Happy so. Missed you lots. It's okay, so don't be sorry. I am not mad at you. Just worried," Itachi stammered as he gently lifted the covers under her chin. "I came right away after I found out you were back in the hospital. I thought you were starting to get better with how active you were before I left." Itachi began to run his calloused fingers through Yumiya's hair, soothing her oncoming headache. Yumiya leaned into Itachi's touch as she grabbed onto her blanket to put them up to cover her nose and mouth. Intrusive memories of her dad patting her head began to fill her mind. She could feel his large dark hands in a similar rhythm to her brother in her mind's eye, with his usual placid face showing a hint of concern which overlaid Itachi's. She smiled sadly at him. "Yumiya? Why yes?" she replied, blinking rapidly before glancing up at her brother. "I must have worried you sick for being gone for so long. I should be the one who is sorry." Yumiya faced her brother, her cheek completely covered by her pillow, and looked at Itachi's guilty expression with a comforting smile. "It's okay. You're back. Safe." Itachi nodded before looking as if he remembered something. "Ah, you didn't answer my question. What is Kyubi?" he insisted. "It must have given you quite a scare to make you wake up like that." Yumiya bit her lip. "That's right, I said his name out loud. I can't tell him the full truth and I suck at lying. What a pickle. Evil fox sleep. Big evil fox. Bad," she whimpered, hoping that that was enough information. "Ah, a nightmare demon," Itachi replied while nodding as if he knew exactly what Yumiya was talking about. "I used to have one myself when I was younger. It was a giant crow with fangs that I had to defeat. They leave with time and never cause harm." Itachi slowed his head pats, his eyes going distant. His voice lowered as he continued with a humorless laugh. Funny enough, I would rather be fighting a giant fanged crow than have the dreams that I have now. Yumiya was about to say something before he shook his head and quickened his slowed pace. Besides, nightmares are a part of sleeping, they never hurt you. So, don't worry, we will surely overcome them. Yumiya scrunched her brow at that, knowing full well that neither of them could control her dreams or the tragedy soon to come. If only that were true. Nothing is going to prevent the Kyuubi from rampaging through the village. But I weak. Itachi paused his petting as if her words struck him. He then clenched his hand into a fist and lowered himself to her eye level, their foreheads touching. We are Uchiha, Yumiya, he stated simply. Father always says that our weakest are others' strongest. Even if you have your arms and legs cut off, even if you become blind and mute, you are still strong. Uchiha's strength does not lie in one person, it is shared, he stated before taking something out of his pant pocket. Yumiya looked to see that it was the stuffed cat. It looked as pristine as it was when she first gave it to Itachi. So, don't worry about it and focus on getting better. Leave the strength to me and Chi, he continued before placing the cat doll next to Yumiya with a comforting smile on his face. Now go to sleep, you should be resting. Yumiya looked between Chi and Itachi and gave her brother an encouraging smile. She snuggled herself into her covers, knowing perfectly well that she wasn't going to sleep anytime soon with the questions swirling around in he and Itachi and gave her brother an encouraging smile. She snuggled herself into her covers, knowing perfectly well that she wasn't going to sleep anytime soon with the questions swirling around in her head. Hey Ida, tell Trip. Tell. Why hurt? Yumiya asked hastily, clutching the ends of her soft blanket. Itachi's eyes widened at her questions and was silent for a moment. He then got up from his chair and tucked Yumiya in. I just went on an adventure with father and just got scratched up on the way back. It is no big deal. Yumiya's eyes flashed with frustration, making her puff out her cheeks. I wanna know. First, mama no tell. Now you no tell. Don't like. She huffed. Why can't I get a straight answer from anyone? Yumiya glanced at Itachi and her expression softened at him as he rubbed the back of his neck in unease. I know that not knowing stuff can be troubling. But you will understand when you are older. Her frown deepened in response to his reply until an idea came to mind. Maybe I need to change my approach. Something is very wrong here and I will get to the bottom of it. Maybe I should ask about the definition of words instead. I might finally understand that one word that has been bugging me for months. No tell Trip. Tell words? No big words, right? Yumiya asked hesitantly. She felt anticipation bubble within her when she saw Itachi's shoulders relax. Of course, I can tell you the meanings of words. I know many of them and I can write them too, he replied lightly. Really? She squealed, leaning forward on her bed. Tell ninja is. Itachi put his hand under his chin in contemplation before a glint came into his eyes. Ninja are people trained in the ninja arts. They fight for their people's safety. Father is an amazing ninja and mother used to be one too before she had us. One day, I am going to become a ninja too and keep you safe. Cool. I won too? Yumiya asked, her eyes like puppy dogs. Itachi's eyes darkened but quickly covered it. You don't have to be a ninja when I am. Besides, there are a lot of other things you can do, he insisted. Okay, she replied, trying her best to sound disappointed. Thought so. But I am sure to find a way to learn some ninjutsu. Now for the kicker. Tell me. What senso? Yumiya asked her brother carefully. A moment of silence passed between them as Itachi's relaxed shoulders tensed again with his face seemingly devoid of emotion. It's not something you should concern yourself with. Before Yumiya could reply, there was a knock on the door. Is Yumiya awake? Fugaku asked as he entered the room with Mikoto closely beside him. Yumiya turned to her guardians and hid her frown under her blanket. Like Itachi, Fugaku's loose robes did not hide the traumas of his trip. He was thinner than when she last saw him, and his skin was slightly tanned due to the constant sun exposure. Even though she could see the wariness in his eyes, his straight posture revealed none of his discomfort. Fugaku wore a stern frown on his face with a hint of worry by the scrunch of his eyebrows. Mikoto smiled down at Itachi and Yumiya, eyes teary. She went over to the pair and motioned Itachi over and rested a hand on his shoulder. Yumiya, my baby. You will have to stay here for a few days. Seeing the tears in Mikoto's eyes made Yumiya's anger fuel her determination. I must get to the bottom of this and get better while doing it. Months went by and Yumiya felt like she was going to pop with annoyance. After her solemn days in the hospital, there was nothing but celebration after celebration. There was nothing wrong with the celebrations in it of itself. In fact, she even got to see a glimpse of the fourth Hokage when he got inaugurated during one. What infuriated her was that the reasons were completely lost from her. What a ninja wants hidden stays hidden. That or I'm just stupid. Yumiya grumbled as she turned the page of her book and stared intently at the illegible characters, a new pitiful pastime. The qualms of being illiterate. This book could have the answers to all my questions. Everything. She ran her small fingers down the page, caressing its slightly wrinkled edges. Why do things have to be so close yet so far? Yumiya, stop playing with my cookbook and come here. Or a lousy cookbook. She sighed before getting up from her spot beside the window in the living room. Coming. Yumiya walked over to the front door where an expectant Mikoto was waiting. Her guardian's stomach was as big as a pumpkin and made her waddle instead of walk. On one hand she held a paper that looked like a list and rubbed her stomach with the other. Come along and be my little helper. I need a few things from the market, Mikoto ushered as she slipped on her wooden sandals. Yumiya nodded and quickly mirrored her guardian and followed her out the door. The summer day was bright and hot while Yumiya walked down the dusty dirt road. She held her guardian's hand tightly as she walked toward the crowded open market. Aisles of stands aligned the long, massive street, some covered by white tarps and others basking their products in the blazing sun. Merchants in colorful garb shouted over each other to usher curious customers to come to and from their stalls in organized chaos. In the heat, everyone's skin glistened with sweat that mixed with the sparkling specks that sprinkled from the dry dirt road. Even though the colorful assortments of fruits and vegetables caught Yumiya's eye as she passed, she wanted nothing more than to cover her ears and run to her peaceful home. Go home now? Yumiya shouted, avoiding a rugged passerby leading a muscular black bull that was hauling a cart full of raging chickens, its hoofs almost stepping on her toes. Nonsense. We just got here. Now, here is the list. Can you tell me what we need from it? Mikoto asked before placing the paper into Yumiya's hand. Be but no read. Yumiya whined before looking nervously at the grocery list. She realized why her guardian handed her illiterate self the list the moment she put her eyes on it. In addition to words and numbers, there were neat sketches of different perishables items that they needed. Oh, Yumiya glanced at Mikoto who had her eyebrow raised, waiting expectantly as they walked around the market. First carrots. Yumiya squeaked before looking around for a stall piled with them. There. Oh. Lead us to them, Mikoto cooed as she made Yumiya weave through the crowd to where a cheery plump woman greeted them. Good afternoon, Yumiya's guardian greeted in reply before looking down at Yumiya, motioning her to do the same. Afternoon good, Yumiya stammered, cheeks red from noticing her mistake. The stall clerk laughed before asking them how many carrots they would like. They both looked down at Yumiya and she quickly answered. 5. Great job, Yumiya. My baby is so smart, Mikoto cheered, making Yumiya's pink cheeks deepen into a tomato red. Mikoto then took out a scroll and swiftly popped the carrots into it after paying the stall owner what was due. They repeated the process as they went down the list, Yumiya slowly getting used to the people and buttered up by Mikoto's constant praises. When they neared the end of their list, Yumiya felt an intense presence. Concerned, she looked at Mikoto who was doing some small talk with the stall clerk. She closed her eyes and turned her head into the direction of the sensation, shocked at what she saw with her mind's eye. There were 3 flames in one body. The dominant one encompassed a much darker one while a smaller flame pulsed indifferently to it. She opened her eyes to see a beautiful woman with the longest red hair she had ever seen. The eerie woman looked too normal. She wore a dark green apron dress over her white shirt and had a cream reusable grocery bag hanging on her shoulder. Her back was to them until she was finished with whatever she was doing. The woman then revealed to Yumiya her vibrant violet eyes and her soft face. Yumiya, it is rude to stare, Mikoto scowled, making Yumiya flinch out of her stupor. Her guardian then took a gander at who Yumiya was gazing at before her black eyes sparkled with familiarity. Kushina. Is that you? Mikoto cheerfully called, making Yumiya's heart drop. Before she walked over, she stopped and winced in pain and gripped Yumiya's hand before walking it off. Yumiya looked up at her guardian with concern as she was led over to Kushina, who turned around at the sound of her name with a gleam in her eyes. Mikoto, it's been a while, you know. And you're expecting. She squealed, motioning to her friend's stomach as she met up with the pair. Mikoto nodded happily, rubbing her belly. Yes, I haven't seen you since your wedding. How is Lord Fourth? That long ago? Goodness, life just passes us by. Minato is fine. He fits the Hokage role well, Kushina replied with a hand on her cheek before looking down at Yumiya. She kneeled to Yumiya's level with her smile bright, making the small girl take a step back. And who is this? Yumiya gripped Mikoto's skirt and hid her face behind it nervously. She's the Hokage's wife? No wonder her presence is so big. And she must be pregnant due to all those flames. What do I do? What do I say? Mikoto put her hand on Yumiya's back and gently pushed her forward. This is Yumiya, my second. Now Yumiya, don't be shy. Say hello to Mrs. Namikaze. Yumiya looked toward the intimidating Kushina, lifting her hand before immediately grabbing it down with the other. Bow instead of handshake. Bow instead of handshake. She gripped the hem of her dress to resist the urge before giving a deep bow. I Yumiya. AAP sure, Mrs. Namikaze. She shouted, her face beat red from knowing she made more slips in her speech. Kushina looked like stars were emitting from her as she squealed in delight. She quickly put her hands on Yumiya's shoulders and rubbed her cheek against hers. "Hey, so cute. I wish I'll have such a good girl as you know." She cooed before looking into Yumiya's eyes. "But I kept my maiden's name, so call me Mrs. Uzumaki instead, or better yet, Auntie Kushina." Yumiya stared at Kushina in shock, tongue-tied. She's Naruto's mother. Naruto is in her. But why is her stomach so flat? Isn't he due in a few months? Wait, the Nine-Tails attack is happening in a few months. She's going to die. Die. Overwhelmed, Yumiya shrieked as she shook herself out of Kushina's arms and quickly hid herself behind Mikoto's skirt. "Oh, my apologies," Mikoto sighed, putting a comforting hand on Yumiya's trembling back. "Yumiya has never been good with strangers. There, dear. She is very frail, so she hardly goes out." Kushina stood up and put a hand over her mouth. "Poor thing. I am so sorry." She turned to Yumiya. "I did not mean to scare you, you know." Yumiya's eyes met Kushina's, feeling immense guilt about her behavior. She slowly let go of Mikoto's skirt and walked up to her, clutching the hem of her dress. It okay, Auntie? Auntie S surprised me," Yumiya stuttered, rubbing her foot into the dirt road. "Ha, so cute," Kushina cooed, putting her hand out to touch Yumiya but stopped herself. "If you don't mind me asking," Mikoto interjected, "why did you keep your maiden's name?" "I thought it was custom to take the husband's surname." "It is, but I decided to keep my maiden's name, so that other Uzumaki will hear of me and be more willing to come here. Konoha will be a safe haven for Uzumaki descendants and have it be an official clan of Konoha." "Really? That's great. When will it be official?" Kushina's expression shifted from all smiles to a look of annoyance, crossing her arms. "Sometime in early winter. The council is being way too difficult. Especially that Danzo. They're insistent on making it not a priority and go on and on about how the war just ended. It's been almost a year and reconstruction has been going smoother than anyone expected. Those elders need to calm down, you know." Before Mikoto could reply, she leaned over and let out a surprised shout. "Mikoto, are you okay?" Kushina cried, hastily grabbing Mikoto's hand. "I am fine." The strong contraction took me by surprise. "I think it's time," Mikoto huffed in reply, trying to straighten herself with Kushina's assistance. Yumiya looked down at the small puddle forming under Mikoto's feet. "Auntie, water broke," she cried as she tugged at Kushina's green dress. "Take Mikoto to the hospital quickly." "Ah, the hospital is miles away. Why does a village as big as this only have one hospital? It would be more likely for Sasuke to be born in the middle of the road than there at this point. Is there a clinic around here or something?" Kushina's eyes widened at the puddle before an intense amount of energy emitted from her, making her hair split into 9 parts and whip around her rapidly. She snarled, "Make way! My friend's in labor, you know. Out of the way!" The crowd surrounding them jumped at Kushina's cry with looks of terror. They rapidly tried to clear a path for them. Yumiya shook at the negative energy but was able to hold her ground due to it not being directed at her. "Don't you worry, Mikoto, I will get you to the hospital in a jiffy," Kushina said soothingly. "Too far," Yumiya screamed, gripping Kushina's dress as she followed them in tow. "Help need." "Kushina, Yumiya is right. Smart girl ah." Mikoto winced at another contraction, causing her to misstep and lean into her friend. The sweat slipping down her head caused her hair to stick to her face. At this rate, we won't make it to the hospital. I have a scroll full of supplies in case this happened. Those incompetent They told me I had another week. Just take me to a shady area and I will have my baby there." Mikoto heaved, gritting her teeth as they moved forward. You mean in a dark alley or in the park somewhere? That's ludicrous. We just need to catch a ride, Kushina cried, panic creeping into her voice. Help! Help! Someone! Yumiya shrieked into the crowd. Suddenly, a dark-haired trio swiftly appeared in front of them, all looking the same in their Uchiha police uniforms. Yumiya realized that they looked so similar because they were triplets. We heard your cries. Please, let us take you to the hospital, the young officers offered in unison. Well, hurry up you three. A woman can't hold a baby in, you know. Kushina shouted, 1 foot forward in anticipation to push past them. Mikoto weakly nodded to them and beckoned them to do what they needed to do. The 3 of them looked at each other before 2 of them put their hands together into hand signs. One of them shouted, Transformation Jutsu. A giant puff of smoke emitted from them both to reveal them gone with a hand-drawn wooden wagon in their place. Come on, the remaining officer ushered with an open hand. Kushina nodded before quickly helping Mikoto and herself on. Yumiya quickly followed. The officer grabbed onto the carriage and began to run as fast as he could to the hospital. Yumiya felt dizzy watching the building zoom by with bursts of wind slapping her face, gripping onto the makeshift wagon's edge for dear life. She always thought that the road was smooth since she only walked the dirt road's powdery surface, but that was far from reality. Clutters of rocks were scattered across the road, causing the wagon to bump them often. Out of all the days, why did Sasuke want to come now? She winced as Mikoto yelled in agony in her ears with every big bump, tears now streaming from her eyes. Why did Fugaku give in when I told him I wanted a 3rd child? Why did I want a 3rd child? She screamed at the top of her lungs. It's coming, damn it! It's ripping up my insides. Naka, have mercy. Get it out. Yumiya grabbed onto her guardian's shoulder but she hardly seemed to notice. We almost there. You okay? You okay? She said, trying to sound soothing. We are almost there, Mikoto, Kushina comforted nervously, her hands on both Yumiya and Mikoto to prevent them from falling out of the cart. She flung her face toward the running officer, enraged. Hey, ride smoothing your big oaf. Can you see you are making Mikoto feel worse? If Mikoto's baby pops out from a bump in the road, you will deeply regret it, you know. She snarled, beating her foot on the wagon. My apologies, but please refrain from beating my brother or we will no longer have a wagon. The hospital is up ahead, the officer replied, taking a quick glance behind. Mikoto let out another hurling scream, deep red seeping through her clothes. She quickly started to chant a string of indistinguishable prayers, eyes becoming distant as if in a trance. Kushina put her hand into Mikoto's. Here's my hand. When you feel another contraction, just squeeze. The crunch from Kushina's hand mixed with the bumps made Yumiya's stomach curdle, resulting in bile climbing up her throat. She struggled to lean outside the vehicle and emptied the contents out of her stomach, splattering an unsuspecting passerby's kimono. Sorry. She cried in between her dry heaving. When Yumiya's nausea passed, the sight of the hospital made her shed tears of relief. Before the wagon came to a complete stop, Kushina scooped the wailing Mikoto into her arms and ran into the hospital, leaving Yumiya and the police officers to bite the dust. Quick! My friend needs care immediately, you know. She hollered as she held Mikoto like a damsel in distress. Yumiya watched the pair run in before struggling to get out of the wagon herself, her stomach hurting with a rancid taste in her mouth. She looked back with wide eyes when a set of long calloused hands grabbed her from behind. Another smooth job well done for us officers, right Suki? The policeman asked with an indifferent smile, letting Yumiya's legs dangle due to him holding her by under her arms. Yumiya heard a puff of smoke and turned to see the other officer wheezing with his hand on his knees, sweating profusely. Easy for you to say, Mikazuki. You are not the one almost out of chakra and covered in all this gross liquid. Suki replied with a heavy sigh, exasperated. Hey, don't blame me. You're the one who volunteered and insisted on showing off your transformation skills, Mikazuki replied bluntly. Besides, think of the awards we are going to get. I bet Shingetsu already alerted the boss and his son. After giving the boss's daughter to a nurse, I will alert the Lord Fourth and he will surely give us even more praise. What? Why? Didn't you know the woman with the boss's wife was Lord Fourth's wife? That is double promotion material. Yumiya just leaned her head down, hanging limp in Mikazuki's hands, feeling heavy in her arms strained. I am so done with this day. You! What are you doing making that poor child hang like that? A woman in a nurse uniform demanded as she swaggered out of the hospital, her dirty blonde hair in a messy ponytail and baggy eyes a fiery hot pink. The police officers turned simultaneously at the nurse. "Akatsuki, is that you? We haven't seen you since graduation," they said in unison. Yeah. Now hand Yumiya to me," she scowled before snatching her away from the two black-haired teens, making sure to hold the little girl the right way. "There, little Yumiya, I got you now. You remember me, right?" Yumiya paid no mind to the trio and just wearily blinked at them. "How do you even know the boss's daughter's name?" Suki asked. "Zip it, you, and come on. You two need a change of clothes and your injuries checked," Akatsuki sighed, her back to them and walking back into the hospital. As the nurse walked into the hospital, Yumiya's droopy eyes closed, lost to the world. And while she slept, the fox roared with rage in her dreams. Yumiya sat up from her bed and stretched, feeling more refreshed than she had in a long time. She looked outside of her window at the bright morning and reflected upon the changes that unfolded. Life in the Uchiha household seemed to have formed into organized chaos the moment Mikoto returned from the hospital with baby Sasuke. With Sasuke came an abundance of screeches, his endless demands and needing to be attended by every able-bodied family member. Much to Yumiya's dismay, she was not able-bodied but feeble and bedridden with another fever. So, she laid there, trapped in her room for 2 whole weeks. It was worse when Mikoto prevented her from meeting Sasuke a full week after just to make sure she was well enough to see the baby. The only bright side to her plight was that she hardly saw Fugaku. He was graced by work. He left in the early mornings and returned in the late evenings, stealthily avoiding most of Sasuke's demands. The only time she saw him was when he opened her bedroom to stare her down once in the morning and once at night, a very eerie sight to see. But today, Yumiya felt as bright as the early morning rays with her fever gone. She got up and ran out of her stuffy room to Sasuke's, whose room was luckily next door. Yumiya slowly slid open the door and saw her old crib stationed in the middle of the room. The gaps in the brown railing were wide enough for her to see Sasuke laying snugly against its cream cushion. She crept deeper into his room and climbed the railing with familiar ease to get a better look at him. Yumiya smiled as she gazed at Sasuke while he slept soundly, marveling at his angelic appearance. Like a cherub, his cheeks and nose were rosy against his bright face. He gripped his fluffy blanket tucked around him with his lashes twitching as he dreamed. "Nice to meet you," she whispered to him in English before putting her finger on his hand, inwardly gushing as the baby curled his fingers around it. As she rubbed her thumb gently over Sasuke's fingers, she heard a distant knock that came from the front door, making her lift her head. "Kushina, it is a pleasure to see you again. Come in." Yumiya heard Mikoto's pleasant voice echo from downstairs. She felt her good mood crumble the moment she heard Kushina chuckle. "It's so good to see you as well. How you doing? I brought housewarming gifts. There is something for everyone. Here is yours." "Oh, thank you for the gifts. I am faring well, thank you for asking. I will make sure Fugaku and Itachi receive their gifts once they return. However, I must say that this house has been in my husband's family for generations, so it is never too late for housewarming gifts, you know." Yumiya gently pried her finger out of Sasuke's surprisingly strong grasp as she heard Mikoto and Kushina's voices become louder. Knowing that they were coming her way, Yumiya sped out of Sasuke's room and into the long hallway, wishing she could hear their footsteps. It surprised her how light everyone's footsteps were, especially Mikoto's. She did everything silently now that Yumiya thought about it. Sasuke is asleep in his crib and Yumiya is most likely with him. She recently recovered from a fever and your gift will surely brighten her day. The poor thing. I would have also gotten her something that could have helped strengthen her if I knew. Yumiya looked around and saw the entrance to the bathroom slightly opened. She quickly entered the room. The quaint tiled room consisted only of a white toilet, a vanity, and a mirror. The shower and bath were elsewhere, something she always found odd. Another oddity about the room was the window above the toilet. Yumiya turned to the mirror that reflected the natural light from the window, feeling a strong urge to look into it. She lifted her tiny foot onto the toilet lid and climbed onto the counter, her feet dangling off the edge when she situated herself into a sitting position. She stared at her reflection, her black baggy eyes staring back at her. Yumiya glared. Her face, her hair, she hated everything. She watched as her dark brown hair flowed as she turned her head, blowing away the bits that landed against her discolored lips. Yumiya haphazardly ran her locks out of her face, it dead against her hand. She swallowed the lump in her throat and placed her fingers on the cold glass. It wasn't long after she made her deal with Naka that she realized she was not blessed with a photographic memory. Even now, the clarity that she had as a newborn was slowly fading, blurs of details disintegrating in her memories. What she could not recall were blurs in the vast collection of clear moments. Not even her appearance in her past life was completely safe. She missed her old appearance, but she could hardly remember it. What if I forget too much? Diana, she whispered in English, her breath heavy and shallow. My name was Diana Bagley. I was 18 years old when I died. I was driving home from work when a truck hit me. I am now. Before she could continue, there was a knock on the door that made her flinch. Her shoulder bumped against the mirror, and she grabbed hold of the faucet to prevent herself from falling off the counter. Her body shivered as she leaned against the cold mirror. Yumiya, are you in there? Mikoto asked before knocking again. Is everything alright? Yes, Yumiya squeaked as she regained her balance, using the mirror as a crutch. Toilet. On toilet. Alright, remember to wash your hands after you are done, okay? Also, please, do not sit on the counter and muddy the mirror with your hands like before. Yumiya immediately retracted her hands from the mirror, her palm clearly imprinted on it. She bit her lip. Yumiya? Mikoto asked in a warning tone. Silence spread between them before Mikoto sighed. Just don't do it again and come to your room when you are done in there. You don't want to keep your Auntie Kushina waiting, do you? No. Coming. Yumiya called. Mikoto's lack of response let Yumiya know that she was gone. She felt safe enough to grumble as she climbed off the vanity. She then flushed the empty toilet and took out a stool to get up to the sink to wash her hands, knowing full well that Mikoto would know if she didn't. Yumiya slowly opened the door to the empty hallway and resigned herself to her fate. She saw the door to her room was open, the voices of Mikoto and Kushina conversing inside. Mikoto, which one do you think little Yumiya would like better? This hairpin or the other? Kushina fretted, her voice quick and jumpy. I thought of buying her a kimono or two at that boutique I found near the market, but I was at a loss when the woman asked for her size. Mikoto chuckled. Kushina, when have you become such a worrywart? My daughter loves just about everything I put on her and I think they are quite adorable. Yumiya peeked into her room to see Kushina and Mikoto kneeling on seating cushions by her bed. Kushina was holding two shiny wooden stick hairpins with flowers carved on the ends of each one. One was reddish-brown while the other was a deep chocolate. She leaned against the door frame, already feeling tired just imagining the activity that was about to ensue. Despite that, she must admit that the pins were quite eye-catching. Mikoto turned to the bedroom door toward Yumiya, and their eyes met. Mikoto's smile widened. Kushina looked at her and brightened as well. There you are, Yumiya. Come in. Don't be shy, Kushina ushered. Yumiya hesitantly walked to where Mikoto was kneeling next to Kushina. She stood awkwardly between them. Their radiating presence felt suffocating in the closed space of her room. She looked to Kushina, stiff in her movement and greeted her. Welcome home. She shouted, blushing when she realized she slipped up her greeting again. Kushina let out a gush as she put her hand over her heart. Ah, you're so cute, you know. She scooted closer to Yumiya to give her a better view of the hairpins. Yumiya, do you like them? Mikoto asked. Kushina made sure to get them just for you. Yumiya stared at the pins in Kushina's hand, twiddling her fingers nervously. Yes. Pretty, she whispered. Let me do your hair. I know a perfect style. Kushina piped. Yumiya unconsciously grabbed a piece of her hair and nodded. Okay, she said and watched Mikoto get up and take a brush out of the drawer of her end table. Remember to be gentle, Kushina. I don't want to see chunks of her hair all over the place like that one time. Kushina gasped as she grabbed Yumiya's shoulders and sat her in front of her. You still remember that? That was years ago. I really thought you had to pull the knots out, you know. Mikoto sniggered as she handed the brush to Kushina. Yes, it was a miracle that you were not bald back then. Especially with all the knots I found when I brushed yours. Kushina laughed in reply. Yumiya felt Kushina lift portions of her hair and gently start to brush it, her tangles tightening as the brush forced her hair to separate. Yumiya flinched at the sting of getting her hair pulled before the familiar feeling of dizziness overcame her. Her heart stopped as the images in her mind's eye began to merge into her reality. She knew what was coming but wasn't ready for it. Yumiya wanted to cry out and struggle to prevent what happened in the forest, but her body stilled like last time. She felt Kushina stop combing her hair, but could not hear what she was saying, for the voices of her memories filled her ears. Sadness filled her being, but those feelings were mixed with the ones present to her from long ago. She was no longer sitting in her room as Yumiya Uchiha, but in her bathroom as Diana Bagley. Ack, she hissed quietly, letting go of her brush that sucked to her puffy light brown hair. She stared down at the cause of her discomfort. Her left hand felt prickly and numb. She knew the cause, the jagged scar that ran down her palm made sure of it. Diana looked at the wall of the large bathroom at a painting of a young girl looking out in a hilly landscape, its realism shining brightly with its concise colors. But Diana noticed none of the intricate aspects, they looked faded against the script of her initials painted in the corner. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," Diana called as she glanced at the door, flexing her hand as pain tingled across her fingers. "Diana sweet, are you? Oh dearie, you should have called me," her mom remarked, assessing Diana's condition before closing the bathroom door behind her. "Is your carpal tunnel?" "I'm fine. I'm just..." She rubbed her agitated hand. "Quite nervous about today." Diana motioned to the shiny navy blue graduation robe hanging on the shower curtain rod. Her mom gave a look of understanding. "I see. Well, just standing isn't going to fix your hair. Sit down." Diana sat down on the toilet seat lid, facing the tub that was littered with scented beauty products that were sold in her mom's company, Baggly Bangs written on the different-sized bottles. She felt her hand receive a hard pinch which caused her to hiss in pain and Mikoto calling her name, making her flinch. "Sorry, Diana sweet. You should have wet your brush more," her mom sighed guilty, the brush that was stuck in her hair in her hand. Diana smelt the nostalgic scent of pure lavender emit from the product her mom put in her hair before feeling the soft bristles of the brush against her usually rebellious curls. "I am thinking of doing a mermaid braid," her mom remarked. Diana bit her lip. "Mom, we can't do that. We don't have time. Can't I have something simpler? Like a French braid?" Her mom snorted. "A French braid? My daughter will not wear a casual braid on her graduation day. You really hurt my pride as a hairstylist. A simple elegant style like a mermaid braid is not something that would take me hours to do." Her mom turned on the sink to wet her brush. "Besides, there's nothing wrong with being fashionably late. And you have a large class size. They need time for the seniors to gather, organize your class, and have you all practice at least once if my memory is correct. So being a few minutes, heck, even 15 minutes late will not prevent you from attending graduation. I am sure your teachers must have frightened you into thinking that you had to be early. Teachers can be sneaky like that." Diana relaxed her shoulders as she followed her mom's logic. A few moments passed between them, her feeling at ease in her mom's company. "There, all done. What do you think?" her mom asked as she put her hands on her shoulders. Diana got up from the toilet seat and looked at herself in the mirror. She pulled a few strands behind her ear before she assessed her appearance. She was of average height with skin a light coffee. She disliked the freckles on her face and bags under her hazel eyes. "I almost forgot. Your dad will be driving you to graduation," her mom bluntly told her. This made her body freeze and the serene feeling within her shatter. "Dad is?" she asked, her voice cracking a little. "Of course," her mom tooted as grabbed a bow from the drawer and tied it to the end of her hair. "Your father insisted." Diana wanted to argue, but she knew that she would shut her down like all the other times she tried to argue about her dad before. Sometimes, she wondered how her mom could be so clueless. Her frozen body went ablaze as she thought about him. As if on cue, there was a knock on the door and a deep voice call from behind it. Diana leered at the door whereas her mom's face brightened with hope. "Come in, honey. Just finished doing our daughter's hair," her mom called cheerfully. Diana wished her dad would decide to not open the door and just ignore her like always, but slowly, the door creaked open to reveal the bane of her existence. At a glance, he did not look like someone who would devote their life to being a concept artist for a video game company. In his black suit and navy blue tie, he looked as much like a military man as he did in his youth. However, unlike in his youth, life chipped away at his appearance. Deep bags hung under his sharp light brown eyes and frown lines carved his espresso brown skin. He straightened his back as he approached and cleared his throat. Diana's shoulders hunched and looked toward her mom with the look of betrayal. Her mom only smiled. Diana felt as though she was slapped in the face, but she was pinched in her cheek. "Anywho, I think I hear Sterling calling. I will see you two later. Love you." Her mom cheered to break the ice before kissing Diana and her husband on the cheek before leaving. There was a moment of silence between them as Diana's dad stared her down, his expression unreadable. She could hardly stand the tension. "Diana, we need to talk," her dad commanded, his voice soft but stern. Her stomach curdled at his voice, making her cross her arms over her stomach. The spiky feeling of fear wrapped around her fiery, clutching it tightly. "There is nothing we need to talk about," Dad, she uttered, the numb feeling in her hand intensifying. I will be out in a bit. I still have to put my makeup on. Her dad took a step forward, making her recoil. You can do your makeup in the car. We can talk here or there. I am not a patient man. Before Diana could reply, a hot energy filled her and the scene before her shattered. In front of her was no longer her intimidating father but her frantic guardian kneeling before her, tightly gripping her arms. Yumiya, can you hear me? Mikoto cried, gently shaking her. Yumiya nodded sluggishly, her mind feeling foggy and her body heavy. She blinked down at Mikoto's eyes glowing red with the Sharingan. It is okay. You are fine, Mikoto whispered before giving Yumiya a tight embrace. She felt limp in her guardian's arms, so she leaned against her with all her weight. In response, Mikoto picked her up. You must be exhausted. Time for bed, Mikoto said carefully before doing just that. Yumiya looked to see Kushina lifting the covers of her bed and helped Mikoto tuck her into it. Has this happened before? Kushina asked with a concerned expression. Mikoto nodded as she took the pin out of Yumiya's hair. Yes. I am sorry you had to witness it. Don't be sorry. I am just glad that we got her out of whatever she was in. Yumiya watched as the pair talked and felt a pang of guilt as they conversed. She knew the hallucination that she was having was not normal and wondered if she was really going crazy. Suddenly, the sounds of baby Sasuke's screams echoed throughout the house. Mikoto got up from Yumiya's bed and looked toward the door in a rush. Kushina, can you stay with Yumiya for a moment? Sure. Mikoto sped out of the room. Can, Kushina voiced, looking deep in thought. Yumiya gripped her blanket as she looked at Kushina's distant expression. Sorry, she whispered with a sniffle. Kushina exhaled and kneeled by her bedside. She let out a chuckle. You're as apologetic as your mom, you know, she replied before brushing Yumiya's hair from her face. We just want you to get better, she replied. Do you hurt anywhere? Yumiya shook her head. No. Tired. Kushina grabbed Yumiya's hand. Then, I will just tell you a story that was passed down by my grandma to my ma and from my ma to me. Kushina began her tale. Yumiya tried to listen to the story, but her eyes were growing heavy. She watched as Kushina got very into the story she was telling, changing her voice whenever the characters were talking and even making sound effects. It really wasn't a story that someone would normally sleep through, but Yumiya couldn't keep her eyes open. When she closed them, she felt Kushina rub her hand against her head. Yumiya wanted to back away from the chakra emitting from her touch, but it was so warm and comfortable. She felt safe as she was lulled into a deep slumber. Yumiya knew that she was not safe. The moon appeared bigger in the opaque night sky and the silence that surrounded her was deafening. She was deep in a forest outside of Konoha, its tall trees making the area darker. Don't worry, me. It's just a nightmare. A dark nightmare. She froze when she stepped on something wet with the smell of iron overwhelming her senses. She looked down to see a bloodied chain below her. She covered her mouth at the sight and backed away from it as quickly as she could. Yumiya tried to wake herself up, but nothing happened. Instead, there was a beckoning impulse for her to follow the chain that led down a path of broken trees. Trapped, she complied. She walked down the tattered path, the glow of the chain and the moon being her only light. As she walked, she heard raging roars in the distance which made her tremble. She then entered a clearing and what she saw was worse than she ever imagined. Blood was splattered everywhere and there laid Kushina and an unidentifiable man lay motionless in the middle of it, the chain that led her to this clearing ending in a gaping hole in Kushina's stomach. They both appeared to be reaching out. Above them stood the Kyuubi in all its glory, its claws covered in their blood. Suddenly, Yumiya heard crying in the distance to see a baby Naruto on an altar. The Kyuubi ears twitched at the baby's cries and its eyes gleamed like a predator who found its prey. Slowly it walked, its tails thrashing. Yumiya tried to move, but she stood there frozen and could only watch the beast lift its paw to squish the child. She screamed, "Kyuubi, stop! Not Naruto! Not Naruto!" Yumiya's eyes sprang open with a gasp, only to find herself back in her room. She could still smell the blood which made her tremble. How do you know those names? Yumiya's blood went cold when she turned around to see Kushina, her face ashen with her hand quivering over her stomach. She knew instantly that she talked in her sleep again and the last person she would want to hear her, had no name? No. What wrong? Scary. Auntie scary. She cried, feeling as if she was grasping straws to salvage the situation. She struggled out of bed and walked toward Kushina with her arms open. Auntie! Yumiya begged, please. Kushina flinched and doubled over, making Yumiya stop in her tracks. ACH. What you said, and your vision have serious meanings. Tell me what you saw. Tell me the truth. Truth? She asked, her body beginning to tremble. Then, the door opened to reveal a concerned Mikoto with a babbling Sasuke on her hip. I heard a commotion, Mikoto said as she walked toward the pair. Is everything alright? Kushina, you look quite ill, and what is Yumiya doing out of bed? She asked while she readjusted little Sasuke who was sucking on his fingers. Before Kushina could reply, she hunched over in pain, her knees buckling. Mikoto tried to help Kushina with her free arm, but Kushina moved away and struggled to straighten herself on her own. Mikoto watched Kushina with her hand to her heart. Kushina, are you? I'm fine, there's nothing wrong, Kushina uttered as she clutched her stomach. I just got a horrible stomachache, you know. Yeah. A stomachache. Ugh. I gotta go. Yumiya noticed liquid spreading across the floor. She looked toward her guardian and gasped. Mama, water. There was a puff of smoke. Once it cleared, it revealed that Kushina's stomach wasn't flat but showing clear signs that she was pregnant. She looked down at the puddle on the floor in shock. I can't have him here. I can't have him here, you know. Kushina cried as she shook her head before trying to run away. Mikoto grabbed Kushina with her free hand, her eyes flashing red. Kushina stopped struggling. The contractions. I numbed them with genjutsu. It is a very fragile jutsu, so I must be touching you to cast it. Your water just broke, and the hospital is on the other side of the village, Mikoto said before handing a whining Sasuke to Yumiya. Yumiya held Sasuke with wide eyes, him heavy in her arms. She watched as Mikoto stubbornly assisted Kushina into the hallway. There is enough space in the living room for you to have your child. I have some spare futon somewhere, Mikoto mumbled, more to herself than to Kushina. But Mikoto, Kushina cried. And Yashiro's wife worked as a midwife before she retired. Mikoto! Kushina shouted before ripping herself out of Mikoto's grasp in front of the stairs. You can't help me, you know. She bent forward again with another contraction, grabbing the railing for support. Mikoto stepped forward and gently grasped her hand, looking hurt. I apologize for being rash, Mikoto told her softly. I will not ask you why you hid your pregnancy nor why you are so hesitant for assistance. So please, let me help you as you helped me. Kushina looked down at the stairs. Okay. I need you to contact Minato and Biwako. They need to know. And you got to listen to them when they come, she fretted. Ah, my son. He was not supposed to come yet, you know. Mikoto gave Kushina a weak smile. I understand. The doctor was not accurate with my children's date of birth either, she said as they walked down the stairs. Now, I want you to breathe deeply. You will feel your contractions once I let go, but you need to stay calm. Stress will hurt the baby. Kushina nodded before taking a deep breath. Mikoto led her to the large living room and sat her down onto a seating cushion before looking back at Yumiya. She let go of Kushina and took Sasuke out of Yumiya's arms. I will be putting Sasuke back into his crib and will be right back. Strangers will be here to take care of Kushina. I need you to be brave, Yumiya. Can you do that for me? Mikoto told her softly, her voice quick. Yumiya nodded and watched her guardian go upstairs and deal with Sasuke before rushing out of the door. She stared at the door in a daze, completely at a loss. She did not feel brave. She did not feel brave like Mikoto wanted. Too many things were coming at her at once as she stared at the front door Mikoto rushed out of. Her past life, her new life, her sickness, her deal. Her chest ached. Kushina was in labor, and the nine tails might as well come out and squish her like a bug at any moment. It's hopeless. Yumiya? Kushina hissed. Yumiya jumped and whipped her head toward Kushina and watched her get up from the seating cushion in the living room. Yes, auntie? Can you tell me where you keep a spare futon? Kushina asked, breathing deeply. Yumiya bit her lip, noticing how uncomfortable Kushina was. She remembered her guardian fretting about how there was enough room for a futon for Kushina to lay in. She unconsciously put a hand over her lips as she thought of where one would be. She wished that she explored the house more, but constantly being bedridden made that a bit difficult. Ah! She shouted and shot up from her spot. No! I'll get. Like a flick of a switch, she recalled how Mikoto used to sleep on a futon next to her crib at night, so she could take care of her faster. She was sure that there was also one in Sasuke's room. She scurried upstairs to Sasuke's room but stopped herself from running straight in when she didn't immediately hear the baby's coos. She slowly opened the door to see Sasuke sleeping soundly in his crib. Yumiya tiptoed to the closet. Inside, She saw the futon she was looking for, but it was under a heap of pillows and blankets. There were also Sasuke's baby supplies and scrolls packed neatly in it as well. Yumiya grabbed onto the futon's soft fabric and pulled as hard as she could, but the bedding would not budge. So, she pulled the lighter pillows and blankets onto the floor before trying again. She accidentally hit her head on the shelf above her as she did this, making her hiss. She paused when she heard Sasuke whine and looked to see that he only shifted a bit in his sleep. Yumiya continued to pull on the futon until it was successfully out. She sighed in relief when she grabbed the bottom part of it and carried it downstairs, the bedding dragging behind her. When she reached the living room, she walked in on Kushina slowly pacing across the room. "I'm okay. I am fine, you know. I got a good grip on him and freaking out will only loosen it," she said in a hushed voice. "I must find out what was in her dream." Yumiya was about to interrupt Kushina but felt the fiery chakra of the Kyuubi fluctuate within her. She watched Kushina groan and stagger as her chakra overtook it. "Auntie!" Yumiya screamed, dropping the futon, and running to her side. "I'm fine." Naruto pulled a surprise attack, you know, Kushina replied as she rubbed her stomach, her voice. "Did you bring the futon?" He settled down, "So let me help you prepare it." No. Yumiya looked toward the discarded futon before jumping up from her spot. "Stay. No help," she insisted before running back up the stairs to get blankets and a pillow from Sasuke's room. Yumiya felt as if she was preparing Kushina's deathbed as she spread the bedding across the living room floor, panting from overexertion. She could feel red chakra within Kushina struggling to rip out of her even without focusing on it. "Where's Minato when you need him? People call him the fastest man alive, and he is a turtle when you need him most," she grumbled before flinching and rubbing her belly faster. All that preparation for nothing. You were not supposed to come for another 2 weeks, you know. Why did you have to inherit my impatience, Naruto? Auntie?" Yumiya panted pitifully as she walked up to her, extending one of the blankets she brought down to Kushina. Kushina turned to face her, the sweat on her face making her red hair stick to her cheek. "Thank you. You are a good girl," she said softly, taking the blanket from Yumiya's grasp, wrapping it around herself. Yumiya went over to the futon and motioned for Kushina to come over by patting the bedding. "Come down," she insisted. "Yes, I should," Kushina agreed, walking over to the futon before seating herself down, placing the covers over her legs. Yumiya trembled, holding the rim of her dress tightly as she sat before Kushina. She could not keep her intrusive thoughts at bay. Now that she thought about it, this moment might as well be the last time she will ever see Kushina alive before the Kyuubi breaks free and ravages the village. There was no guarantee that she would survive the attack either. She sobbed at the thought. "Yumiya, don't cry. I'm not mad, you know," Kushina sighed before grabbing Yumiya's small hand. "This is a lot for a 3-year-old to handle. You must be so scared. Especially with your vision," she continued, her pause resulting in her taking a deep breath after another contraction passed through. "Hey, look at me," Kushina urged, grabbing Yumiya's small hand before giving it a small tug. Yumiya shook her head and looked anywhere but at Kushina. The mat under them, the small table in the corner, the door that led to the backyard, the blood that was staining the wooden beams that lined the ceiling. Nothing in the room could distract her from the roars erupting in her mind of how screwed she was. She let out a long moan as she wept, the gravity of their situation hitting her at full force. Kushina rubbed her arm, her hands trembling. "It's okay to be scared, you know," Kushina told her before leaning into her ear. "Let me tell you a secret." Yumiya leaned in with a sniff, rubbing her eyes with her sleeves. "People call me fearless. I have faced bad people, seen death," Kushina began, her voice soft. "My life has been filled with scary things, and felt fear every time." She gave Yumiya's arm a comforting squeeze. "What matters is what you do when you are scared, not if you feel it or not." Yumiya wiped her face with her sleeve and swallowed the lump in her throat. She shook with fright. "Scary. Auntie, scary. When something scares me, I face it head on and fight it, hard. Kick its butt, you know," Kushina replied, punching the air as if to demonstrate. "Now, tell me what you saw in your dream so we can face our fears together." "What you had was a prophetic dream and they are a glimpse of fate, Yumiya. I have only heard of one once before." "Really?" Yumiya asked. "Yes. It was from my grandmother and if I did not listen to her, would have died with the rest of my home village." Yumiya was silent for a moment. She knew that the dreams she had were just nightmares and why she was hallucinating of her past life was beyond her. But those events in her nightmares were of what's to come and her past did happen. At that moment, she felt completely helpless. Then a thought came to her. What if telling her changes something? She looked down at Kushina's shaky hand and put her hand over it. Yumiya concluded that saying nothing wouldn't fix anything, gave in to the small thought. She looked around the house as if she were about to tell a secret. Okay. But very scary, she said before organizing her thoughts and trying to translate them. Dreams no good. Night dark. Big mess. Buildings go. Boom. Boom. Buildings down. Fire and red. Red spreading. Kyubi fault. Kushina's face paled as she clutched her stomach with her other hand, making Yumiya stop in her tracks. No, keep going. Are the buildings in the village? Where was I? She asked, still clutching Yumiya's hand, and urged her forward. Yumiya nodded but knew that her explanation was lacking. She tried moving her arms for more emphasis, her voice becoming more desperate as the images of those dreams came back to her. Too much red. Ground red. People red. Not moving. Kyubi fault. All his fault, she whispered. You there in woods dark. Red chain. Led you. Naruto. She pointed to Kushina's stomach. You, not moving. Kyubi fault. Too red. Kyubi, she could not say more, the images so gruesome that her limited vocabulary could hardly describe. I see, Kushina sighed before squeezing Yumiya's hand with a scream. Actually, I don't see, you know. Stupid. Stupid. Yumiya tried to free herself from Kushina's grasp, feeling the fiery chakra of the Kyubi blazing as if rejoicing over what was said. She watched as Kushina's indigo eyes flashed red and her nails began to sharpen, sinking into Yumiya's fragile skin. Agreeing to Kushina's request was a huge mistake. Was it that she thought she could not dig herself a bigger hole than she already had? She knew that her Japanese was limited, but she didn't expect it to affect her this much. She screamed as the red chakra burned her wrist and Kushina clutched it tighter. You need to tell me more. I know you know. All I got was that my worst fears will become reality. Kushina roared as she slammed her hand on the ground in a rage, her voice almost primal. How can this happen when we put up so many precautions? Are we attacked? Where is Minato? Tell me, you know. No, no. No, no. Yumiya cried, trying to rip her hand away and run away. Kushina let out a feral cry as the Kyubi's fiery chakra frothed around her and popped like lava. Suddenly, Yumiya heard the front door slam open and a flash of yellow with harsh wind before a man appeared on the other side of Kushina. Kushina! The blonde man yelled. Yumiya watched as he quickly pulled down Kushina's covers and undid her clothing to reveal a swirling black void on her stomach that was getting bigger by the second. Tears were dripping from Kushina's eyes, her clawed hands gripping the man's shirt. Minato! Minato made a hand seal before placing his hand over her stomach. All at once, the once fiery chakra was overtaken by him and sucked back into Kushina's stomach. Yumiya watched as Kushina's eyes changed back to indigo and her nails retracted. It was then that she was able to escape her grasp and back away to a safe distance within the room, clutching her injured wrist close to her chest as it throbbed. She wanted to slap herself when she recognized the man. His hair and Hokage robe told her as much. His resemblance to Naruto was uncanny. You are going to be okay, Kushina. I stabilized you and will get you where you need to be, Minato said, his voice shaky as he caressed Kushina's sullen face. Yumiya watched as he took his hand off her stomach and moved to pick Kushina up, but Kushina stopped him. Wait! Minato, you have to listen to me, Kushina cried, gritting her teeth as she moved his hand. We have to evacuate the village. We must do it, you know. The prophecy foretold that the Kyubi will attack the village. Yumiya felt her stomach drop and knew that the consequences of telling Kushina her dreams were unfolding in front of her. She sat there frozen as Minato stared down at his wife and held her hand tightly. Kushina, a prophecy? Like the ones from the great Toad Sage? He asked, his voice wavering. Lord Fourth, I advise you to not flash away without having me check on your wife's condition, an elderly woman called as she entered the living room with Mikoto and a pair of nurses. Despite her elderly appearance, the woman had long light brown hair tied into a high ponytail with no signs of graying and sharp dark eyes ever so calculating. She wore a long purple dress with a white haori. Minato turned to face the woman, relief written all over his face. Biwako, please help her. I have never seen Kushina act this way. Of course, Kushina is not herself. She is in labor. Think of the worst pain you have ever experienced, and she is in worse pain, Biwako replied bluntly as she knelt to the feet of Kushina and clapped her hands twice. The nurse immediately rushed forward, seeming to automatically know what Biwako wanted them to do. As Biwako lifted Kushina's covers, one nurse grabbed Kushina's free hand and the other went next to Biwako with a scroll. The nurse by the elderly woman opened the scroll and medical tools and a bucket of hot water popped out of it. It is too late to move her, Minato. It is about time for Kushina to push, Biwako announced as she put on her gloves. Thankfully, we are safe here and Umbu are posted outside. Yumiya was so entranced by the scene unfolding before her that she did not notice Mikoto come up behind her until she scooped her up into her arms. Mama, she whimpered as she wrapped her arms around her guardian's neck. I know, Yumiya. You have been very brave. Do not fret. These people are here to help Kushina, not hurt her, Mikoto whispered, giving Yumiya a comforting hug. She looked down at Yumiya's wrist and her face morphed into one of concern fiery. Yumiya, my baby, what happened to your wrist? She cried. Yumiya stammered, worry not, Mikoto. One of my nurses will heal her, Biwako interjected before glancing back at the nurse station behind her. Thank you, Madam Sarutobi, Mikoto replied with a quick bow. Yumiya watched the nurse bow to Biwako before going up to them. Show me her wrist, the nurse asked, her hand glowing green. No, wait. My daughter is sensitive to chakra, Mikoto stated. Understood, the nurse replied before removing her hand and taking out some bandages and ointment. Mikoto looked down at the items presented and accepted it by gently taking Yumiya's arm, showing it to the nurse. The nurse quickly took it and opened the jar of medicine to apply in Yumiya's burn before wrapping it with a bandage. It smelt of an indistinguishable assortment of bitter herbs. Mikoto, do you know the location of your husband? Minato asked, his voice calm and clear. Yes, Lord Fourth, Mikoto replied simply. Yumiya leaned over to see Minato writing something into a scroll. I need you to take this to your husband and to alert him that there has been an evacuation order. Mikoto's face flashed with confusion before quickly appearing cordial. I see. I will give this to him right away. Mikoto rushed up to Minato and took the scroll from him with a bow. Yumiya bit her lip as she watched her guardian walk toward her and caress her cheek. After she is done wrapping you up, go upstairs and stay with Sasuke until I get back, she told her before walking out the door. Yumiya watched her guardian leave before Kushina's cries made her look back. Yumiya, please tell Minato what you saw. She cried. Maybe he can understand your baby talk, you know. Yumiya sat there frozen as Minato brought his attention to her for the first time, his face pale but eyes ever so calculating. She could feel his chakra without focusing on it like the Kyuubi. She knew that he could kill her without even blinking. She bit her lips so hard that she could taste iron. Kushina, let's not focus on a prophecy. I have already called for an evacuation order, and everything is going smoothly. All you need to worry about is delivering Naruto. And we will have a full family just like we always dreamed, Minato assured before leaning down and kiss her on her cheek. Just imagine, Kushina sniffed before shaking her head. No. There's no time. I can't, you know. She sobbed. I can't live knowing that hundreds died for our selfish dream. I can't live. After Naruto is born, it is time to push, Kushina. Remember to push with the contraction, Biwako interjected, voice calm despite the tension. Minato quickly placed his hand back onto Kushina's stomach. On the count of 3. 3, 2, 1, push. Kushina leaned forward at the push, gritting her teeth. Kill me, please. She cried as she pushed before laying back. You have to. So selfish, aren't we? So, she cried out as she pushed again. The world around Yumiya became a blurry mess at Kushina's pleas for death, the fact that she was part of it sinking its claws into her heart. Ignorance truly was bliss. She couldn't move as the Kyuubi's chakra clawed at her, seeping into her skin. She could hardly breathe as she stared at the scene unfolding before her. Her heart thudded, phantom hands wrapping around her neck. She felt the familiar feeling of death staring her down. When she finally took a breath, instinct took over. She screamed at the top of her lungs before fleeing the living room, slipping on the hallway floor as she hurried toward the back door. She bumped against the side of its frame before escaping, her side surely bruised. The cries for her to come back fell on deaf ears. She did not look back. Run. Running was the one thing in her mind. She opened the back gate and ran into the dark forest, not caring which direction. Tree branches and prickly bushes slapped her, and her heart clawed in her chest, but she did not feel it. Farther into the woods. Danger was behind her. Her life demanded it. Darkness overhead skewed her vision, but it did not stop her. The sharp sticks and rocks under her feet stabbed her, but it did not stop her. It wasn't until she tripped on a stump and the feeling of being weightless stopped her. Her vision began to spin as she rolled down a hill. Her breath struck out of her when a tree broke her descent. Her body slammed against the ground. She gasped a few strangled breaths before she tried to push herself up to run again, but the pain sprang up her leg and made her fall onto the leafy ground. She screamed and tried again and again, slamming her fist with every failed attempt. Her endless attempts to get up turned into her just slamming the groan and screaming, the anger and sadness of her condition flowing out of her. Soon, those screams became mute with her voice hoarse and only silent tears escaped her. Once her tears had dried and most of her energy left her, she turned over and looked up at the trees that loomed over her. She did not know how much time passed as she took shaky breaths. The pain from her injuries became more prevalent. Her whole body throbbed, and it struck with every breath she took. Helplessness. That sickening feeling gnawed at her. The feeling that came and went in waves throughout this pitiful life of hers. It bogged her down to the muddy spot. She didn't even notice the small flame that zipped toward her. "I found you," Itachi panted, his voice frantic. Yumiya jumped when she saw his face. Itachi looked her up and down, poking here and there with an intensity she hadn't seen before. She was too weak to stop him even when he touched her throbbing ankle. He breathed a sigh of relief. "Cuts, bruises, and a sprained ankle," he stated before digging his hand into his back pouch to take out supplies. "Nothing basic aid and few nights rest won't fix." Yumiya hiccuped as she watched him open a tin of ointment and put it on her wounds and bruises, his hands precise and experienced. Her mind began to drift as a pleasant smell caressed her nose and the cooling sensation from the ointment turned her stabbing pain into an endurable throb. It was much more pleasant than the nurse's medicine. "Hinoki." She said nothing as he continued, her body drained, but she noticed his hands tremble with each wrap of the bandage. "Sorry," Itachi whimpered. "I should have been there to protect you. I was on my way home when I heard you screaming. And I couldn't find you." It sounded as if he was trying to hold back a lump in his throat. "When you stopped, I feared the worst." Yumiya never heard Itachi sound like this before. He was usually calm and collected, always in control. "Ninja never cries. Ninja never," he chanted under his breath as he continued his work, blinking rapidly with a look of shame. She lifted her now bandaged hand and patted his pant leg and mouthed, "Ida," to comfort him. Instead of giving him any sort of solace, it seemed to have made him feel worse. His silent sniffs quickly morphed into desperate gurgles until a sob finally escaped him. She felt a few droplets fall into her eyes and down her cheeks. Despite his crying, Itachi did not stop his task of patching her up and did it as gently as his little hands could. Despite Yumiya's vision being blurred by tears, she saw him clearer than ever before. The conniving image of a boy who would kill her when she was older shattered to reveal the 5-year-old boy he was. The anime be damned. This was her brother, not some ruthless character from a show. Itachi the character might kill her, but not him. Not her brother. Shame filled her as she struggled to push herself up. "Do not move," Itachi hiccuped as he whipped the mucus off his face with his arm. "I am not finished. You cannot move until I am done." Yumiya pulled him in for a hug and leaned his head on her shoulder. "Sorry," she whispered. "Was bad?" "Yumiya, you do not need to be sorry." Itachi sniffed as he returned the hug, avoiding all her bandages. He gave her a light squeeze. "Can you tell me what happened?" Itachi asked as he let go of their embrace. Yumiya hesitantly nodded, knowing that Itachi would understand her better at least. "Kushina visited. Gave gifts. But baby. Had baby at home. Said wrong and ran away," she said with head down and holding the hem of her now muddied dress. "I am sure they will understand why you ran away. It is quite a shock that the Hokage's wife is giving birth at our home," Itachi rambled as he put his medical supplies away. "And if they do not understand, I will explain it to them. You must have been very overwhelmed. Mother and father would understand, and I am sure Kushina would too. They must be very worried since you ran away." Itachi paused for a second. "Now I think about it, Mikoto would have followed you and Mama with Papa. Out," Yumiya added, typing to get up but flinched, her body sore. Itachi frowned at that before turning around and motioning to his back. "You are in no condition to walk on your own. Let me carry you home." "Kei," she replied before wrapping her arms around his neck. Yumiya could not believe she did not notice how drained she felt before he said that. She might feel significantly better with the medical treatment, but all that running and screaming could knock anyone out. Whatever happens, I promise that I will get stronger. No, the strongest ninja alive, Itachi assured as effortlessly he hauled her onto his back, giving her a piggyback ride. Yumiya shook her head as she tightened her grip. No, Itachi glanced back at her with confusion. What do you mean no? I need to protect you from all the bad that might come at us. No, she said again with more momentum. She did not want to just be protected, or did she want her emotions to roar out like they did? Her mind might as well regress to that of a child with what she did, or she never truly matured in her past life. Whatever it was, she needed to grow stronger to do what she needed to do. Then a memory of what Itachi said in the past came to her mind and reached down to grab his hand. Strength shared, so both strong, Yumiya told him, her mind clear. Fight for me, no. Fight together. Together. Itachi blinked at her outburst before giving her a small comforting smile. Okay, get better and let's grow stronger together. Yumiya watched her trees pass by in a blur as Itachi climbed up the hill and ran through the woods, anticipating what's to come. A part of her wanted to believe that she was overreacting. She was 3 years old after all. Yumiya did not want to think about the dangers ahead and think only happy thoughts, but reality always had its ways of reminding her. Itachi stopped and his body tensed, making her tighten her grip. What Ron? Shoo, he whispered before looking around and slowly stepped forward. She scrunched her brows at his sudden demands and looked ahead. She looked up at the lights of their house which illuminated their path. Nothing could have set him off until she looked down. She covered her mouth in horror. In front of them, a masked man laid motionless, the smell of blood making her cover her mouth. Itachi jumped up into the branches above and looked at the backyard. She could hear a baby crying from the living room. She could deduce that Naruto was born. Her heart stopped when she saw a man in black robes and swirl markings on his white mask phase through the gate and into the house. She rubbed her eyes when she saw it, thinking it was a ghost until screams erupted and part of the house exploded. She hid her face behind Itachi's in horror as a wave of heat and wooden debris scraped her. The chickens clucked in panic and fled into the woods. She wanted to flee too, but the yells and the clings of metal made fear she felt when she faced Kushina a mundane worry. When she gained the confidence to look up, the part of the house where the living room was supposed to be was on fire, flaming debris scattering the once pristine backyard. She looked toward the window where Sasuke's room was and it thankfully looked unscathed, but the fire looked to be spreading. Sasuke, Itachi whispered as he ran to the edge of the branch and jumped into the window of Sasuke's room. They looked and saw the room untouched with Sasuke lying in his crib uninjured but weeping with fright, his body shivering and his face wet with tears and snot. Yumiya got off Itachi and sat herself down onto the floor, watching her brother quickly grab a sling from his messy closet. He took the howling Sasuke out of his crib and into the sling before shushing him as he rocked. But it did little to stop Sasuke's cries. Yumiya closed her eyes and felt only two flames shining dimly, one brighter than the other. She felt her body ice over, knowing that there should be more and that she recognized the flame that struggled so dimly. Mama! She cried, hastily trying to get up and go to the living room, but the pain from her ankle stopped her. Yumiya quickly got up and flinched when she put into her sprained ankle. But that didn't stop her from. Itachi then presented her back to her and she hopped onto his back before they headed downstairs to the destroyed living room. Blood splattered with the midwife's assistants dead on the floor. Kushina was no longer in her futon, it now lay bloodied and bared before them. There was a fiery hole where the wall used to be, and a hanging piece of fiery wood fell onto the ground. But Yumiya could care less of the state of the house when Mikoto laid there, bloodied with Biwako over her with her hands glowing green over her stomach. Mama! Yumiya cried as Itachi ran over to the pair. Mikoto opened her eyes and looked up at them, eyes glossed over and breathing shallow. She lifted her hand up and Itachi grabbed it. You're all alive, thank Naka, she cried relief before hastily adding, you have to leave. Itachi looked up at Biwako and demanded, what happened here? We were ambushed by a masked man and your mother protected me. Now, listen to your mother and run head to the shelter, Biwako replied, not looking away from her healing. Yumiya watched Mikoto's eyes flutter and wanted to gag at the coppery smell of blood. She couldn't stop staring at the source. Along with small cuts littering her guardian's body, a large gaping wound that went along her side that seemed to be closing slowly with Biwako's chakra. It's better than it looks, so do not worry, Mikoto urged Itachi. I need you to run as fast as you can, but we will be fine. Reinforcements will come, Biwako added. Yumiya shook her head. No leave. No. No. She cried, feeling her guardian's flame fading away. Mikoto coughed and a heap of blood came out her mouth, her hand slipping from Itachi's grasp. I will take care of your mother. Focus on your survival. Go. Biwako barked. Yumiya reached out to them as Itachi got up and slowly backed away. She didn't know what to think as her guardian lay wounded. So much blood. So much red. All she saw was red as her vision became clearer than it had ever been. Go. Biwako repeated, intent leaking out of her. Mama. Yumiya screamed as Itachi turned to run away. He rushed out of the house and into the chaotic street, not looking back. A crowd of people were outside and rushing in the same direction with men in police uniform guiding them. Yumiya clung to him like a lifeline as Itachi waved through the mass of people. She thought her tears were dry, but they came with new vigor as Mikoto's wounded body and desperate face showed clearly in her mind's eye. We have to go to the shelter, he mumbled to himself. Sasuke's cries were reduced to weak whimpers, but a strong gust of wind made him scream. Yumiya felt a huge wave of chakra suddenly appear from above and she knew what it was by its intense killing intent. She jerked up at the sky and screamed as she pointed, Kyubi. The nine-tailed fox appeared from above and crashed into the middle of the village, the impact sending waves of destruction in all directions. Chaos ensued. Yumiya couldn't keep her eyes away from the Kyubi as it stood at a distance, its nine tails flicking in all directions, crashing into buildings. She wanted to cover her ears as it let out a blood-curdling roar before clawing at the building around him, the waves from his cries exploding buildings and sending them and people up in the air. Look out! She screamed. No one was safe as the Kyubi wreaked havoc. The crowd around them scrambled in horror as the debris came hurtling toward them. Itachi quickly grabbed Yumiya, ripping her off his back and onto the ground before covering her and Sasuke with his body. She closed her eyes and covered her ears, but she still heard the cries of the unfortunate and the sound of debris colliding with the ground around them. Miraculously, none of the heavy debris hit them and Yumiya opened her eyes when the crashing around them subsided and the ground stopped shaking. She swallowed bile when she saw those who weren't so lucky, her tears not obscuring her vision. The bodies of the unfortunate scattered across the wreckage, their bloodied bodies in different states of mutilation and homes caved in. Itachi quickly covered her eyes with his hand, Sasuke screaming in the other. Do not look, he said, his voice eerily calm. Only look at what is in front of us. He took his hand away from her face and turned around to put Yumiya back on his back. She wrapped his neck and her legs around his waist before he broke into a run. She saw that the path they were previously taking was now blocked by a massive piece of building, so Itachi ran down desolate streets and back alleys, occasionally jumping over rocks and weaving around scattered pieces of houses. As they went, the sound of a desperate girl's cries was heard in the distance. Mom! She called frantically before coughing. Mom! Itachi turned a corner and she saw a small girl who looked not much older than Itachi. Her dark brown hair was covered in gray dust and her purple long-sleeved shirt was tattered. The girl's brown eyes looked dazed as she called out once more. Yumiya looked up and saw the largest piece of a building hurling toward them and she quickly slapped Itachi's back to get his attention on it before pointing it and the girl with a whine. Come on! She screamed, getting the girl's attention. He leaped into the alleyway and pulled the girl out of it before the rubble colliding with the building crushed them. Dust surrounded them, making Yumiya cough and clutch Itachi's body tighter. Luck seemed to be on their side once again, for she only felt sharp pebbles hit her already bandaged body. Once the dust cleared, she saw the little girl on the ground, battered but alright as well. She looked as if she was Itachi's age. Have you seen my mom? She cried as she looked around them. Yumiya and Itachi shook their heads at the same time. The little girl then stared at Yumiya. Sharingan? She whispered. Shelter. Yumiya cried. Shelter. Yumiya's right. We have no time to look for your mother and we must head to the shelter to be safe, Itachi continued before grabbing her girl's hand. Follow me. But Mom! The girl cried as she tried to pull her hand back, but Itachi's grip was too strong. Your mom most likely would be there as well, he added before running again, dragging the girl with them. Yumiya looked back at the girl and saw her biting her lip but was keeping up with Itachi's pace. And they were off, weaving through buildings and over wreckage as the ground occasionally shook from the Kyubi's howls and buildings getting destroyed. Yumiya felt herself lose her grip but quickly held on, her aching arms screaming for her to let go. Itachi's pacing began to quicken when they saw more alive people than dead, all rushing toward the same destination. They followed, the sounds of rushing water and demanding shouts filling their ears the more they ran. Head to the southeast shelters. The voices cried. To the southeast shelters. They came to a clearing to see that everyone was running toward the Hokage monument, the Hokage's faces being a beacon of hope for Yumiya's sore eyes. She noticed that the people heading to the side of the mountain were small buildings hanging along the monument wall, safe from view and from Kyuubi's destruction. At the base of it was a wooden bridge over a raging river that they all had to cross to get to the shelter. Shelter! Yumiya cried with relief, pointing at it with excitement. Itachi then slowed to a stop to survey the crowd, confusing her greatly. Yumiya was about to slap the back of his head but stopped herself when she saw where her brother was looking. Amongst the people was Fugaku with others in police uniform, some directing the scattered crowd to line up to cross the bridge while others aided the injured. Their father stood tall with his arms crossed, grimacing as he surveyed his surroundings. He did not seem to notice them. Go on ahead, Itachi told the girl after he stopped in his tracks, making the girl look at him with confusion. Yumiya thought Itachi was crazy. She knew that Fugaku was just fine without them and her aches in her arms and legs were increasing by the second. It would be better for them to go to the shelter and go to him afterward. But we are so close, the girl insisted, pulling Itachi's hand toward the bridge. Come on, we can go to our parents after. No, go. Shelter, Yumiya added, shaking Itachi's shoulders for emphasis. My dad is the head of police. He is amongst those policemen, Itachi replied, motioning over to the policeman with his head as he rocked the whimpering Sasuke. It will be quick, Yumiya shook him some more. Come on. Come on. She whined. I have to show him that we are alright, Itachi said bluntly, letting go of the girl's hand. The girl brought her hands close to her chest before looking at the bridge and back at them. Fine, she whimpered. Find me when you get to the shelter, okay? I'm Izumi, Itachi, her brother replied with a slight bow. Izumi gave them a sad smile before running into the crowd heading toward the bridge. Yumiya frowned as she watched Izumi run to the bridge, wishing Itachi wasn't so stubborn. Follow. Whines weakly in a last-ditch effort to persuade her brother. We have to go see father, Yumiya. He must know that we are alright, Itachi told her as he ran over Fugaku. Father, he called, catching his attention. Fugaku looked down at them, his sour expression unchanged as he looked them up and down. I knew you would get here alright. Head to the shelter, he commanded before going back to assessing the crowd. Yumiya puffed out her cheeks at him. He could at least act concerned. Itachi nodded and turned around to do what he was instructed, looking back at their father for a second before running into the crowd as they went to the bridge. It groaned as they crossed it. Itachi tried to weave through the crowd but couldn't be due to how tightly packed everyone was. Despite the bridge's wooden frame, it held them up fine, but Yumiya felt her heart quicken due to it sinking due to the weight of everyone. Mixed with her anxiety was rejoicing anticipation, for they were rejoicing anticipation as they were already nearly halfway across. However, that solace was short-lived. The Kyuubi let out another reverberating howl, causing the river to rage and the bridge to tremble. She looked up to see the Kyuubi waving its claws at flashes of light and dots as if he were swatting at flies. Then let out a final roar of outrage before being pushed out of the village by some force. Yumiya would have been celebrating this development if the massive fragments of building and slabs of stone hadn't been thrown toward them by the beast. Policemen shouted to protect the bridge and tried to break down the rocks, but there was too much debris. Panic ensued as the wreckage hit the bridge. People shrieked and bawled as they tried to get off the bridge, trampling whoever was in their way to avoid getting hit. Yumiya knew that her luck had run out the moment. Someone bumped into her, and her arms gave out. She heard a huge crack as the bridge broke with her descension. Everything was in slow motion as she watched Itachi look back in utter horror as